Okay, if we can get ready, folks, it's now 6 o'clock. Thank you. Right, good evening. Good evening to members of the public. Good evening, councillors. Good evening to our visiting members this evening. I'm Councillor Mark Corey, Chair of the Scrutiny Panel, and I need to go through a bit of housekeeping first of all. In an event of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned this evening, but if the alarm does sound, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, whichever is appropriate, and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runward Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available afterwards to watch. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break around 7:30, subject to the progress of business. We will do that based on a consensual view. So I am Councillor Mark Corey, Councillor for Wivenhoe Ward, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. I will pass to my right and ask councillors and officers to introduce themselves, and when visiting members come to the table, I'll do the same. So, Tina.
Good evening, Councillor Tina Bourne, Labour Member, Greenstead Ward.
Good evening, Richard Block, Assistant Director, Corporate Improvement Services and Senior Management Team Support for the panel.
Good evening, Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Good evening, Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Good evening, Pauline Hazel, Shrub End Ward, substituting for Councillor Nigel Chapman.
Good evening, Derek Loveland from Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward.
Dennis Willets, Lexington and Braeswick Ward.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the committee.
Thank you and good evening all. Item 2 is substitutions, and Councillor Hazel just clearly stated she is here subbing for Councillor Chapman. Thank you. There are no other substitutions. Item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items scheduled for this evening's meeting. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any to declare on this agenda this evening? Councillors, Councillor Bourne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Declaring an interest as a Director of Colchester Borough Homes.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes, as a Director of Colchester Commercial Holdings, I declare a non-pecuniary interest relating to the group of Empora companies. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I see no other declarations being put forward, so thanks for those. Moving on, item 5, the minutes. Can we approve the minutes, please, from the panel's meeting on the 17th of August 2021? Are they correct, and can we agree them? I see no dissent. I hear agreement and hands. Thank you. Agreed. Moving on, item 6, general have your say. We have no general have your say speakers, no members of the public tonight, but I do know we've got Councillor King waiting to speak on one of the items in particular, which is the finance item, item 12, I believe. Item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. No such decisions have been taken. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 9, items to be requested by members of the panel and other members. There are none. We have agreed this agenda, which we've got enough on this evening. Item 10 is our first substantial item, which is the review of Colchester Borough Homes performance 2020 to 2021. So I ask our visiting guests, Chair of CBH, Dirk Patterson, CEO of CBH, Philip Sullivan, and I know we have Karen Lohman and Matt Armstrong both on the call virtually as well. And I'll invite, I think, Lindsay, you're coming forward to speak first. Lindsay Barker, please. And we also have Jeff Beals as well at the back, I believe, as well. Thank you, Jeff. So if we need, we'll ask officers to come forward. But if Dirk and Philip, if you'd like to come forward at this point, that would be great. Thank you. Lindsay, I'll go to you first. Thanks.
Many thanks, Chair. So Lindsay Barker, Strategic Director at Colchester Borough Council, and I oversee the client-side relationship with Colchester Borough Homes. And I'm here to provide an introduction, really, to your review of Colchester Borough Homes. Normally, the portfolio holder would come along as well, but Andrew has a clash with his birthday, so I'm terribly sorry he's not with us this evening. As you've already said, we have our...
I can't hear a bloody thing.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. I think that was one of our guests unmuted.
Are they able to hear online?
Yeah, I just want to check. Can we do a double check, please, Richard, to ensure that we can hear online? Karen and Matthew, Matt Armstrong, thumbs up. Thank you. You can hear us. So hopefully we can sort out Paul Cook to ensure he can hear. I know his connection is quite a long way away, so hopefully it'll be okay. Lindsay, carry on. Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just firstly welcome Philip Sullivan. So Philip is the new incoming Chief Exec of Colchester Borough Homes. We were delighted at the council, as I know they were at Colchester Borough Homes, to be able to appoint from such a strong field of candidates. Philip has now been in post probably for what feels like forever, but actually only a matter of weeks, and has already made a great start. So really pleased to have Philip Sullivan on board as the new Chief Exec. And I'm absolutely certain that Dirk will want to also thank Karen and Matt too for doing a great job in the interim following Gareth Mitchell's departure. So just wanted to position the scrutiny review by mentioning what for us on the council side were some of the key highlights from the previous year. You can't mention the previous year without mentioning the COVID pandemic, because it has been all-consuming, no more so than in our housing services. And I think it's certainly appropriate for us to pay tribute to the great job that Colchester Borough Homes did during the pandemic, managing our housing response. They not only maintained service delivery throughout all of the lockdowns and the many restrictions that we went through over the past 12 months, but they also managed to maintain repairs and maintenance of all of our properties, which I think is very impressive. And I'm sure they will talk to you about the response, that the support that was given to tenants, etc., during the response. But I won't steal their thunder on that one, because there's been some great work carried out. I think another key point to mention here is in November 2020, the previous cabinet agreed a 5-year extension to the management agreement, which is a very important agreement to reach, and it's now been extended to August 2028, which shows the confidence that the council has in Colchester Borough Homes as its social housing provider. Also, another achievement that we collaborated on together in August 2021, so this year, together we completed a 2-year project to procure and implement a new housing IT system. Systems never sound that interesting, but they can transform the way that you work, not only in terms of efficiencies, but also in allowing the whole service to work together and the communication to flow freely. It was delivered on time and on budget, in spite of all of the challenges of working from home, working remotely, and trying to adapt to a very new environment. So I think that's, from the council's point of view, a very significant achievement. We will now work closely with Colchester Borough Homes to realise the benefits that that can bring to the ways of working. And then some of you were present, but together we've also delivered new social housing. So we have first units at Creffield Road, Hardings Close in Oldham, and more are in train, and work is underway on Elfrida House, the sheltered accommodation scheme. And again, more work is going into thinking about the future designs for future schemes. So I think it's fair to say that the council feels there's a strong collaborative relationship working across with Colchester Borough Homes, which has really been incredibly helpful over the past year in terms of the COVID response, but also stands us in good stead going forwards. And we're really looking forward to developing this further with Philip, Dirk and the team. So I'm not going to say any more because I'm sure Colchester Borough Homes can position all their achievements themselves, but very pleased to be here to assist them with this review.
Thank you. Do we go first to Dirk or Philip?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a great privilege to be with all of you in this very august hall. It's my first time, and thank you very much for having us. I've been the chair of CBH now for 2 years, and I'm glad to say I came to a strong organisation. And in that 2 years that I've presided over the board at CBH, I've found it has gone from strength to strength. I'm going to really enjoy giving you the evidence for that claim, and hope you will enjoy scrutinising us further on the strengths that we have delivered for you. We're very clear that we are delivering on your behalf. You are the member to which we, the board, report, and we're absolutely clear that that is our duty and indeed our joy. We do so with great exhilaration and energy. I hope that will come over in the reports which we're giving to you tonight. But one of the things that the board does is that it scrutinises the work of the executive on your behalf. And so it is a great delight to invite you to scrutinise us as the member to whom we're responsible. As Lindsay says, for much of my time, I've been working with Gareth Mitchell, who retired in May, and we owe a great deal of thanks to Gareth, who you know well, I know, who delivered some fabulous results for us and for our residents. I'm also enormously grateful that since Gareth's retirement in May and Philip coming on board in September, that we had two exceptional interim joint CEOs in Matt Armstrong and Karen Lohman. They have done a really, really great job and have supported both the employees, the residents and the board very, very well indeed. Philip comes from, as Lindsay said, an extremely strong field of applicants to the position of Chief Executive Officer of Colchester Borough Homes. And so we are expecting great things. We're already seeing great things in Philip, and I've no doubt that you will see that as well as he reports back to you. There was a unanimous agreement across a wide variety of people, both representing the council, our member body, the residents who are absolutely core to all our decision making, and other board members. There was a grueling day of interviews, and Philip came top. So to survive that was a significant achievement in itself. We have no doubt, therefore, that he will be resilient enough to drive this organisation forward, putting residents right at the heart of a great housing future for Colchester for the future. If we could, I'd like to go on to our first slide, Owen. So I'm just going to take you through some of our vital statistics. Yeah, so the next one.
Apologies, Zoom sometimes has a bit of a delay in starting its slideshow.
All right, well, what is about to come to you, just the next, yeah, brilliant, are some vital statistics. If you go to the next slide, that's great. Okay, so on the left-hand side there, you probably already know this, but it's just worth us rehearsing that we look after just short of 6,000 general needs properties across the borough. And of those, there are 595 sheltered tenant properties. If you haven't been to see some of those, it's well worth it. They are state of the art. I'm going to come on to that a little bit later. We also have over 1,300 leaseholders. Significantly, this year, we've relet 474 properties. And it's just important for us collectively to recognize the scale of the operation that we're running here. It is impressive, and the wide variety of properties that we manage on your behalf are really impressive. But that's, of course, not all we do, and we're going to come on to that in a minute. On the right-hand side, and I don't know if we can shift some of the photographs of people listening, always lovely to see, but you are actually obscuring some of the slides at the moment. If not, don't worry, I'll talk you through them. We are, thank you very much, Owen. So we're really, really keen to ensure that we fully understand our customers. In other words, the tenants who live in our homes, that look after our homes along with us, and those people who are in many respects are our collective customers, in other words, the constituents who you represent too. So let me just say a few words about those people. It may be surprising to hear that it is for me that only 5% are from BAME community. Interestingly, 63% of the lead tenants are women in our houses. And by the way, that is represented across our board as well. We have over 60% of the board as women, and I'll come on to that in a minute. They have a real sense of longevity. These people stay with us. Tenants, 45% of our tenants have held the tenancy for more than 10 years. And 25% of them have a known disability, which is also, by the way, represented on our board. Yes, so, they are not particularly young. So lead tenants, 51% are over the age of 55. So that's just a little bit about who our tenants are, but of course there's so much more to our tenants than that. And we seek not only to understand them, but to represent them. So I'll come on to this in a minute, but one of the things that we've really seen an increase of throughout my time as chair is the strength of the tenant's voice. We have tenants to board meetings. We often meet when we can outside COVID times in tenants' own properties or in communities. We don't stick ourselves away and we're in a house the whole time. And we have brought tenants through video conferencing and other means into all of our meetings. We absolutely have tenants as the focus of everything we do. And it is core to us that we know who we are serving here, which is specifically our residents. I'm going to hand over now to Philip to give you some more detail on just what we have delivered over the past year.
Thanks, Dirk. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening. So looking back over the last 12 months and specifically talking about the lockdowns, Colchester Borough homes remain visible on our estates. You'll see the top image, top left is our caretaking service. But we also made sure that we had safe working practices in place so that we could continue to provide essential services. Latest service updates, over the last year, we kept residents updated. So there were over 10,000 phone calls made to vulnerable customers during the lockdowns. Every tenant over the age of 65 received a phone call. We also continued with our 24/7 emergency repair service throughout each lockdown. We wrote to all tenants on several occasions with advice on keeping safe in their homes. Really important to Colchester Borough Homes are our partners, and the image in the middle is with the police. We worked very closely with our partners throughout the lockdowns. No partner more important than the council. But also that partnership brought new meaning during the lockdown. So again, we were sometimes arranging and delivering food parcels and prescriptions, including the caretakers who you've seen in the top left there. And we all embraced new ways of working with video conference to make sure that we could continue to operate effectively as an organisation throughout the lockdowns. And overall performance was really strong. We had 94% satisfaction with the service, 98% satisfaction with the repair service. We continued to make sure our homes were safe with 100% of gas services completed. And in terms of antisocial behaviour, we had 100% satisfaction with the service provided. But it was much more than that and much more than the statistics up there. For example, over 1,300 customers received financial advice during the last year. And again, despite all of the challenges that we all faced last year, Colchester Borough Homes, working very closely with the council, continued to invest in its homes. So 172 new kitchens, 119 new bathrooms, 290 new heating systems, all of this during a pandemic. And our latest performance when compared to other similar organisations is very strong. So we're looking at the chart up there. Any organisation would want to be is in the bottom right-hand segment, because that's where performance is good and cost is low. And for all of the service areas, Colchester Borough Homes is within that bottom right-hand segment. And that's assessed by an independent organisation known as Housemark. And it's something that Colchester Borough Homes and the council should be very proud of. Another really important part of the work of Colchester Borough Homes, day in, day out, but looking back at last year, is the work in tackling homelessness. So last year, the Colchester Borough Homes team dealt with over 1,400 homeless applications. 277 households were prevented from becoming homeless, and 97 people were supported with homes as part of our rough sleeping initiatives. This makes a huge difference to those people's lives. What it also does, if we look at the number of people on the waiting list, over 3,000 waiting for social housing, by preventing people from becoming homeless, it takes pressure off that. So it makes a huge difference to those people's lives, the 277. It also means housing is available for people who desperately need it on top of that, when we can see what that acute pressure is on housing in Colchester. And never more important, in my view, has the resident voice been. That's today and it's last year, which we're looking at specifically. CBH established its online resident voice. That's open to all tenants and leaseholders, and it allowed us to receive feedback on service provision during the lockdown. The resident voice at CBH is leading a positive direction of change with the staff, working very closely together. And last year, over 90 residents were directly involved. And I certainly look forward, having joined CBH, to working really closely with the resident voice and all residents. And we are much more than about the bricks and mortar. Last year, we awarded 23 grants, including several grants to young people and groups that work with young people. Too many to mention, but a number of organisations who work specifically with young people, making sure they get a good start in life. The image in the middle there as well is Good Neighbour Awards. We recognise the great work that our residents do, a number of our residents in their communities. So recognising individuals and groups who have been fantastic neighbours and role models in our communities. And also Garden Awards celebrating tenants who make their outdoor spaces special. And our staff volunteered last year. The image on the right-hand side is one of our colleagues who volunteered at the local NHS Foundation Trust. So, as I say, we're much more than bricks and mortar. Communities are at the heart of what we do and who we are. But we're not able to do this in isolation. Our partnerships are incredibly important to us, and no more so than the partnership that we have with the council.
So one of the things that we've done this year is celebrate 100 years of council housing. And the slide you have in front of you gives you just 4 samples of council housing across the borough, which we've been celebrating. In the top left, some of you may recognise some houses in St Anne's, which we manage. I often say to children visitors who very proudly take on tours of our estates that you can recognise the CBH house by the PV cells on its roof and the really great fences and new front doors. They are a mark of the quality that we instill in our houses and have done, which we've been celebrating 100 years on since council housing started. Just below that is one of the sheltered schemes that we run. I had the privilege of visiting John Lapham Court earlier in the year to present housing awards. You can see that it's really, really well looked after, and lots of those gardens are delivered in combination. Their beauty is delivered with our staff, but also with the residents who really love where they live. It was a great privilege to be able to award gardening awards there with Councillor Ellis, in fact. The top right is an example of some of the state-of-the-art housing that we have developed. More recently, this is a garage site redevelopment, and gives us a sense of the future, which we, the board, as well as staff, are very much focused on, since you have very kindly extended our management agreement. So we're looking forward to thinking about the future much more, but that's an example of the really high quality housing that we are putting in place. That is in Bevan Close. And then one of my favorite opportunities, which I do every now and again, is to visit Enoch House. That is Enoch House up in Greenstead, where I have been known to be singing along with the Warm and Toasty Club. It is a state-of-the-art development. If you haven't been, it's a great one to visit. We have a very similar development, Worsnop House, which has been subject to the board visiting. We have held board meetings there along with the residents in their lounge. It's a terrific development. It is the most beautiful of developments. And I always think if anything were to happen to me in short order, I'd be very happy to end up in any one of those houses. Moving on to the next slide, though, we have, you may well be aware that one of the things that we do on the behalf of you, our member, the council, is we run a development arm. So on the left, Elfrida House is not yet built, but it is being worked on, and we provide project management, architecture, development support. We will be delivering Elfrida House, which will be another different but nonetheless state-of-the-art residential housing, sheltered housing for some of our older residents. And some of you possibly familiar with its predecessor, which was used during the pandemic. Its predecessor had shared bathrooms and bedsits. It was not fit for purpose. And what we're trying to do is not only make things fit for residences fit for purpose for now, but fit for purpose for the foreseeable future. And we're really excited about that development. Equally exciting on the left is the new Mercury Theatre. You may be aware of the Mercury Rising project, which was managed by our development wing. And some of you may, like me, have had the privilege of visiting the Mercury Theatre. I hope you have. It's a great example of the kind of thing that we're able to deliver on your behalf. So we're just going to go on to the next slide, if you will. I said that we at the board are really keen on holding the executive to account on your behalf. And I just wanted to run you through what that board looks like. You may be aware that the board is made up of 3 residents who apply for the position and are interviewed. There are a couple of spaces at the moment. 3 politicians who you nominate, and they come to sit alongside us and scrutinise along with us as directors. 3 independent members. And in addition to those independent members, there's also a chair, that's me, and the CEO also sits on the board. I'm particularly proud of the diversity of our board acting on your behalf. All the committees are chaired by women. That we have very strong skills on our board. We have one of the things I've done is look at the skills very closely with a skills matrix and recruited specifically to the skills that we need in order to hold the executive to account on your behalf for the future. We have particularly strong skills in housing, project management, accountancy, finance, law, and a whole host of others. But key amongst those skills is the understanding of our residents, which is provided not only by councillors who look after residents, but also by the residents themselves. And we develop all of those members by a series of away days. We send them on training. I have myself been on the National Federation of Almo's training today, which I go on twice a year as chair. And we network with our colleagues across other Almos who are providing similar services for other institutions such as yourselves. So I hope that you agree with me that we as a board are providing a service for you to scrutinise your assets and how they are managed. I am increasingly confident that we are a really great board for you, but please challenge me on that at any time. So on with the next slide. Looking to the future, there are some challenges, of course, coming down the track, and we are getting ourselves ready for those. There's increasing regulation and legislation coming our way, and compliance has never been a stronger focus in the light of the Grenfell disaster and the white paper that has come out of that very sad period. But the housing, I suppose the housing systems in the UK have never been under more scrutiny, and we are absolutely prepared for that. One of the great challenges that we have And it is particularly acute as we learn about the economic scenarios in the UK right at the moment, is the cost inflation we're experiencing, both on the materials, but also on the salaries of those who are working outside the public sector across the borough. So actually, it's a real challenge for us to maintain the excellent service going forward that we have done throughout these very difficult past couple of years. We are also embedding a new housing system. We're very, as Lindsay mentioned, we're really proud that we delivered that on time and to budget along with you as our partners. And one of the things that we need to do, because you've invested in it, is to absolutely maximize the benefits of it for our residents. And that is one of the challenges that this very evening, the Chief Executive and I have been discussing in his 2-month appraisal review of how he's delivering. So I'm absolutely confident that Philip is on top of this great challenge. So we're also really enjoying areas for improved performance. You will be very familiar with the 100 homes policy, and also we're looking to improve our capital investment program post-lockdown. Next slide, please. As Lindsay mentioned, you have extended our new management agreement to 2028. We're delighted by that, not just because it shows that you have some faith in what we're doing. We believe that we can build on the services that we're offering really substantially. It gives us the opportunity to look to the future and to implement some of the wider policies across the housing sector that you, the council, have put in place. And to that end, we are preparing a new strategic plan. And to deliver that, we're consulting with residents, with staff, with council officers and other council members, as well as a range of stakeholders. I can tell you that we are feeling ambitious and excited about the prospect of delivering a strategic plan for you on your behalf and for our residents for the future. It is going to be not short on challenges, but also it will provide us with significant opportunities, I think. So we have 8 years, I guess, or thereabouts, to work together. I'm very excited about our partnership with CBC, about what we can deliver together for the residents across the borough in housing. And we look to the future with some ambition. I hope you share that with us, and delighted to take any questions.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you, Philip, and thanks, Lindsay, for your introduction. I'm sure we got many questions after that, and of course you shared with us more resources about how measures that you have in terms of indicators of your performance. So we have that to review and scrutinise as well. I've definitely got some questions of mine to kick off with, but I'll look to councillors around the room for anyone else to indicate. For now, I will kick off. So thank you all. I want to just make a couple of points first and thank yous before I move on to some questions. Having led the council myself through COVID, I got to see firsthand the partnership working that CBH and CBC carried out, but also CBH playing a partnership role in the One Colchester response to COVID, which was excellent. Philip mentioned the phone calls, the proactive phone calls to thousands upon thousands of our residents. That was amazing, and that helped support people, that helped keep people safe. So I thank you for that. That was really above and beyond. The performance during COVID has been excellent as well. We had the everyone in policy from the government, and Gareth Mitchell responded to that and his team and officers below, and he continued to keep us updated on that successful policy. and how he and the team were able to get as many people safe and off the streets as possible. We also had everyone in the cabinet in the sense that Gareth would come and report each week with us. So we had a constant update from the CBH side of things. So I thank him and those who reported into him to give us the information each time. Things like the gas safe, that's an excellent achievement to be 100% safe with all the certifications for a housing sort of management organization. To do that is fantastic, but to do it in such difficult circumstances, of course, we can see there were some lags during the most intense COVID periods, but you've got it up to 100%. It's fantastic. Furthermore, Karen and Matt, really thank you for the period that you kept the ship going. And I actually, during that period, rang Karen up just to ask for quite a small task. And I didn't realize she was kind of interim running the whole show then, but she got on with that task in particular and just helped me out. So they don't shy away from any job too small or any job too big. So thank you both. And then Dirk, you mentioned the project management the CBH have done for Colchester. Again, big projects like the Mercury, down to smaller projects of their own, carrying out adjustments to people's houses. So that has been, again, very worth praising. And lastly, I think that just overall, you have incorporated the voice of residents as much as possible. I think there's always challenge to see how much further we can go, and some of that will come up in my questions, but thank you. So over to the questions. One of the last things in the previous administration I was very happy to see through was £4.4 million investment into insulating our housing stock. So I'd like to ask very briefly how that program is going, because we know how important it is to insulate our homes in order to reduce the carbon footprint, but also with the soaring gas prices not being helped by the mismanagement of the problems we have with Brexit and everything else. Secondly, there is reference to interim accommodation in the report. Now, I understand what temporary accommodation is, and I understand what B&B accommodation is, but this interim accommodation is a new phrase for me, and I just wondered if that could be explained, please. On page 36 as well, it shows the empty properties. It shows empty properties and contractor response repair both going down. For me and for other councillors, I'm sure, understanding that turnaround in empty properties is vital to keep the flow of housing going. Fourth point, I just wanted to ask, and I declare a bit of an interest and say also to Councillor Bourne, she had a big interest in this. The housing waiting list has decreased since I remember it being 4,000 to 5,000 people on the waiting list. Is that because of the positive policies employed over the years by this council in partnership with CBH? I think there has been some excellent policies that have come forward, and again, some of the officers between both CBC and CBH, I think, have come up with some excellent ideas that have been put through. I just wondered what the explanation would be for that. And lastly, I am always wary of management companies on new development sites. I think there's an opportunity, and this has been discussed again in a previous administration, of CBH branching out further. You do an excellent job at project management. Have you looked into the possibility of becoming a sort of management company beyond your remit of your properties? Because, as I say, we have developers who have favourite management companies that they pass to that are really poor in their response compared to the response I think we get from CBH. Those are all my questions and comments. I hope you were able to record all of those, and I will look to councillors across the room to see if there's any other questions coming forward. Thank you. I'll go to the officers now and note down anyone else who wants to speak.
Thank you. Perhaps I can make a start, Councillor. Thank you for those questions. The first question in terms of the insulation programme. So it's ongoing. You'll have seen from the slides that we carried out 160 wall insulations last year. We also carried out some roof insulation work. So in the context of the lockdown, that's progress, but that is ongoing, that programme. In terms of the, you'll have to excuse me whether I've made a note of all of the questions, but you mentioned about interim accommodation. So my understanding of that is that where we've got temporary accommodation, that would often be with individuals who we have a duty to. There's a period where we're assessing an individual who may be in interim accommodation, no duty, and that they would then be expected to move on, as opposed to temporary accommodation where they will then be waiting to move into permanent accommodation.
Do you want me to pick up empty properties?
Yeah.
So you make a really good point, Chair, about empty properties, and I know this has been something which members of the council have been particularly interested in, as have we. And indeed, the first portfolio holder, Councillor Fox, gave me quite a kicking over this on my first day in the job, and I was very happy to have that kicking because it meant that I could push pretty hard the executive on this matter. The story here is not a simple one, however. So whilst it's really important to turn properties around really quickly in order to make an impression on the waiting lists and so on, it's important to do that really, really well. And we believe, because we have our customers right at the heart of what we do, that properties that our customers go into after a turnaround have to be both safe and they have to be high quality. And if you look at the private sector, you will get people turning around customers into very poorly managed turnaround properties who will turn around in 7 to 10 days. We will spend an extra couple of days getting a property really safe. So for example, it depends on what's going on. If we need to do, in the unfortunate case of a needle sweep, that needs to be done meticulously. And we take great pride in making sure that the properties that are turned around have an extremely safe environment. That does mean on some occasions it takes us longer than some in other sectors. Now, I would say it's worth noting that a year ago, the voids turnaround came down by 2.5 days. That was very significant, and we were absolutely on target. We had invested significantly in enabling that to happen by bringing on contractors specifically to do that, because we knew it was a political priority of the council. What happened during lockdown was that the contractors stopped working almost entirely. Everybody was put on furlough. And so we had to do that under our own steam. Magnificently, I think. We still turned around those properties all the way through lockdown. We still moved them on. We still got them turned around to a really, really high quality. But what suffered was a slight increase in the time that it took us to turn them around. So that's the story there. And I think it's really important that we keep an eye both on the timing of turning around voids and the quality of the experience for our customers. And we're always trying to balance that out. I'll let Philip move on to waiting.
Thank you, Dirk. In terms of the waiting list, the current position is that the pressure is for more supply, and that the waiting list, I will only envisage in the coming months, will be going up. The reason being that no one, right or wrong, but no one has been evicted over the last 18 months. And so the pressure is going to just simply continue for the accommodation that we provide. Bear in mind that we currently have over 200 households in temporary accommodation, waiting for permanent accommodation. And so whilst there was no one evicted last year, we did let 474 properties. So we've been eating into that waiting list, arguably artificially, but I can only see over the coming months and beyond that pressure going the wrong way, I'm afraid to say. And I know, speaking with the team at CBH who deal with the temporary accommodation, there is permanent pressure. And so that's only going to push that waiting list up unless the supply increases of new homes.
Yeah, if I could just add a little to that. I have spent a fair amount of time with the housing team and looking at how they're able to manage down the waiting list, which you were absolutely right, it's about 3,000. It has come down. I say absolutely. I think the positive contributions in policy that you have implemented have really helped. But there is absolutely no room for complacency. And actually that waiting list, I think, is still shameful. And it will be a key driver to our strategy going forward. One of the things that has really shocked me as chair is that when a 3-bedroomed house becomes vacant, you have, on average, 350 applicants for each vacant 3-bedroom property. And that is a dreadful statistic. It means that families are in substandard accommodation and they are suffering across our borough. And that is something that our strategy needs to really deal with. And one thing that I, as chair, would like to work with you politicians very hard at to resolve. It brings us on to your next question, which was, have we looked into opportunities to manage properties beyond our current remit? And I would say we will be guided by you, our member to whom we are responsible. But, you know, I think nothing should be off the table in terms of the future of your Almo. We should be able to deliver what you want. So if you think, as politicians, that we should be delivering beyond our current remit, please let us know, and we will work that into our strategy. We don't want to do anything which is outside the confines of what you set us, but it is for you to set those confines. If you want to expand them, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Dirk. Lindsay.
Yeah, just to come in and add to that, really, I think it's fair to say that the current administration has committed very strongly to delivering new supply. So it recommitted to the 100 Homes programme, as you know, which had a bit of a slow start. I think there were some difficulties in terms of purchasing properties, but has now picked up quite significantly. So we're going to see some of those come on stream fairly quickly over the next couple of months, which is really important. That brings much needed housing, and we're able to purchase properties that are, you know, match the need in the area. And as you're aware, we're continuing with the garage sites work with Colchester Borough Homes, which continues to be very important and sometimes can be controversial as we move through the phases. But you can understand from the conversation today how critical it is that we use all of the spare land and assets that we have to deliver housing that's much needed. So it just, I think, highlights how important it is that we continue, even though some of those discussions can be quite difficult, that we continue to look at ways to use assets imaginatively. And Colchester Borough Homes are very involved with us in looking at all of those spare opportunities that we have across our HRA asset. In terms of the development side, so we've already started to have a really good strategic discussion with Colchester Borough Homes. I was invited in to look at what you know, priorities are starting to come forward in the future, and working with the current administration. We're very clear we've got a very challenging year, and possibly beyond, I would think, with all the agendas that have been outlined. Not least, we've got to try and achieve the compliance in the social housing white paper, which is is going to be probably our main focus. But we've also got to continue to deliver the capital investment programme, as well as the new housing that's already been identified, as well as continuing with the sustainability agenda in our council housing to continue to make sure that homes are affordable, because I think that's going to increasingly become the challenge as we go forward. So what we have said is to Colchester Borough Homes, we want them to carry on with the standards. So doing what they do really well is absolutely critical, because those statistics are vital to the council going forwards. But we need to be careful, to agree those priorities over the next year between us, because we've got a lot of challenges and we don't want to stretch a team too widely. So we will be looking at those opportunities. We've got our Amphora housing company as well. So we have got capacity to deliver and develop, and we've got some great project management skills at Colchester Borough Homes, which we will look to continue to use as well. But we've got to just balance everything over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Dirk and Philip, for your answers. I did forget one point myself, which was about evictions, but you've kind of covered that with the evictions ban and its effect changing now. Councillor Bourne, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that this panel has enjoyed a strong relationship with Colchester Borough Homes Chief Exec and Senior Management Team over a long period of time. We've received reports, we've scrutinised really well, we've had some very honest delivery of the challenges that have been faced, and this is even pre-COVID. It's phenomenal to witness the amount of work that was done during the pandemic, and actually, so it looks small, but the life-changing instance around 70 level access showers, that really does change people's lives, to be able to stay in their home, in their council home, and be able to have a wash like the rest of us take for granted, just by having a level access shower put in, and the use of disabled facilities grant and other funding, and the work that Colchester Borough Homes do with our health partners. So, things didn't stop. It's very clear to see from the report and the work that's been done that things haven't stopped. And the heating systems as well, thank goodness that you managed to put those in and didn't stop that work, because with the gas hike now, those tenants now have heating systems that are far more efficient than the boilers that they had before. And I know you've fitted more since then. What I'm really interested in is the Philip, you have been in post. How lovely for your chair of board to give you a performance management review after 2 months in. And I was just, we don't know you as well as we knew the previous chief executive, and you don't come here, you won't be coming here very often, which you might be grateful for after tonight. But it's helpful for the panel, because we try to stay the same members. It's helpful for the panel to know a bit about you and what your impressions have been. So I'm interested to know that, and where you've come from and your background. That would be useful. And also the work that you're currently doing around facilities management, because that was one of the newer things that we transferred from the council over to Colchester Borough Homes, and a lot of people were, well, this is a bit odd, isn't it? Why are we doing this? Why are we transferring our facilities management over to Colchester Borough Homes? But I think we've reaped the reward of that, and I'm just I can see that you've on the red there. I can't find the page now, but on the red there was only one red, and just a query over additional funding for working within the Northern Gateway and taking on some additional activity around that, which wasn't built into the management agreement budget, and the risk, any risks that might pose for either Colchester Borough. A risk for Colchester Borough Homes is a risk for the council, and a risk for council on housing or any of these things is also a risk for Colchester Borough Homes. So, I'm very concerned about the risks and what that means for both parties. If you could talk around that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. Philip, over to you first.
Thank you. So just briefly then about me, and then if I could pick up the other points as well, and thank you for those questions. Just briefly about me, I've worked in housing all of my career. I will say 29 years I've worked in housing, started in local government in London, 12 years at the Guinness Partnership, and then 6 years at a housing association in Suffolk, just up the road from here. And then 4 years as a chief executive for a housing association in East London. And now I'm delighted to be here. I'm a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing. So housing is my background and has been for my whole career. In terms of my first impressions, again, fairly briefly, but my first impressions, I've been really impressed. I've been very impressed by the commitment and dedication of the staff team who I've spent time with. Very impressed and pleased to be working with the board, and Dirk has talked through in terms of the skills and experience of the board, which is great for me coming as the chief exec to have such an able board. You'll have seen the good performance that we've spoken about already, so I won't go back over that. But something that I'm very pleased about is the strong relationship that CBH has with the council, which has come through really strong to me in my first 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm also very impressed by the council. You know, the town deal, I think this is really exciting stuff happening, and I'm delighted to be joining at a time when this is happening. And this week I've been asked to join the board of the Heart of Grinstead project, which I'm absolutely delighted to be part of, but very impressed to see the forward-looking approach of the council in many areas. I've also been very impressed by the estates. So in my first 5 weeks, I've spent several hours walking around the estates. I've been very appreciative of councillors who've taken the time to walk around with me, staff, and I've spent time talking to residents as well. But walking around the estates, I've seen not a single abandoned car, no fly tipping, and very little graffiti. Now that all happens, but the fact I haven't seen it is because CBH and the council are on top of it and dealing with the issues. So I've been very impressed by what I've seen in terms of the estates. So a very good first few weeks, and my first impressions are very positive. And that doesn't mean there's not lots for us to do, because there is, but very impressed. My first impressions are very positive. And in terms of facilities management, so again, in terms of assurance and certainly performance, so we have taken on, and Councillor, you rightly mentioned the Northern Gateway as part of our sort of portfolio of management. And what we've always tried to do working with the council is to be as efficient as we can and take on as much as we can before we need to ask for any additional fee. That doesn't mean that there hasn't or there won't come the point for that. But again, we work very closely with the council officers. When there's a need, we will have those constructive conversations. But clearly, the Northern Gateway is a big addition to our portfolio of management. But I've been very impressed. I've also, in my first few weeks, spent some time at Leisure World and just looking at the health and safety work that the team does. So it's an important aspect of CBH's work, where I'm really keen that we continue to work very closely with the council to make sure that there are no gaps between CBH and the council, to make sure that all of the health and safety and the compliance is adequately covered. But again, my first impressions are a lot of people working really hard to do a very good job.
Thank you, Philip. That was a similar question I was going to ask about your interpretation so far. So thank you for that. And thank you, Councillor Bourne, for those questions. Councillor Lorcan-Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations. I have sat on this panel for a few years, I think, and it was quite good, I think, to have that overview of the service users, of the scale of the service, those sorts of figures. I'm sure, I mean, there may be other more experienced members than me who are already familiar with all of that, but I appreciated all that being pulled together in one place, which I'm not sure had been before. So thank you for that. I was interested in the statistics around the residents, and I think we'd all agree that they absolutely should be at the heart of the service, and that is it's absolutely right that Cottage Borough Homes operates in that way, and I think we see that the results from that. My first question would be: are you able to tell me how representative the residents are of the overall demographics in the borough? I mean, just the one that stands out to me here is the 5% from the BAME community, which from the top of my head, I think we're about 11-12% BAME population in Colchester Borough. So that looks lower. And that, I wonder if you have any thoughts on why that might be. Is there an issue there around access of BAME people to social housing in our borough? What might be the barriers there? Is that just a kind of historical hangover of some kind? And I mean, I should say, I think it's not necessary. I mean, I'm a person who thinks that everybody should have access to social housing. It shouldn't be particularly for any particular group. But given that supply, as we know, is limited, it might be that on some of the other measures, we would expect or want some of those groups to be overrepresented in the figures. So I mean, I'm interested in the residents with known disability as well. How does that compare? Do we have a sense of that that kind of thing? And then I just wanted to zero in a little bit on the customer satisfaction side of things. And just looking through the sort of from the slideshow, the sort of headline statistics there. I mean, they're all very good, but the one that stands out is the satisfaction with quality of home one, which while very good, isn't as exceptional as some of the others we're seeing there. So I'm just wondering if you have a sense of why that's a bit lower than some of the others, what the sources of dissatisfaction might be that residents have with the quality of their homes, and anything that might be able to do to address that. And then just finally, again on customer satisfaction, if we skip forward to page 36 of the report here, we have the statistics and we have some graphs. And just on that, we see there's two lines on a graph on that page that go dramatically downwards. I'm colorblind, so I might be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure one of them is contractor responsive repairs, and I'm less sure that the other one is empty properties. But I just wonder if you could talk us through that, why those lines are going down so dramatically on that graph. Is that just a COVID thing, or is there more to it than that? Thank you.
Shall I kick off? Councillor Whitehead, you are a man after my own heart, in so much as when I first saw this set of statistics, I was asking exactly the same questions. And it's something I asked, really tried to understand from the executive, because you're right. So 5% is low and is not representative of the whole of the borough. And the reason for that is linked to the 45% of tenants that have held the tenancy for more than 10 years. And also the 51% of people who are over 55 years, because as I understand it, and I'm no particular expert in population movement, but BMA statistics across the borough have risen relatively recently compared to the age of our stock and the duration that people tend to stay in our stock. So in other words, because people stay such a long time in our stock, because they like it, I think that's good. They tend to be older, and the BME population is younger, and therefore hasn't had the opportunity yet, because they're, generally speaking, haven't been here long enough to have significant representation in our stock as others have. That said, I totally accept your challenge. That is, these people may well be people who should have access. I don't think there's a problem with access. I just think the way the cycle of our stock works, as I understand it, means that the group who have more recently come to Colchester Borough, who are BME, have not yet fully been represented in our stock. If that is something that we need to challenge and look at accessibility, it is something that we can really take away. I'll hand over to Philip for more of the operational stuff.
Thank you. In terms of the quality of the home, that's for relets, that's voids. And that tends to be because sometimes there is a disparity between expectations and our void standard. And actually our void standard is relatively high compared to many social housing providers. So having a satisfaction with the quality of home at 87% for voids is actually relatively good. What we also have to do is balance that in terms of cost and turnaround. We need to turn around our voids as quickly as possible, which means we need to keep the work to being to the right standard, but doing it in a very timely way. So there is always going to be a balance to find between standard, cost and satisfaction. And at the moment, 87 is, in my view, relatively good. That's my view. In terms of contractor responsive performance, my understanding, which I can check and come back to you, but my understanding is that the contractor performance dipped very dramatically because they furloughed staff, and so we then stepped in.
Can I just ask, and is that situation kind of resolved itself now, or is that ongoing?
So specifically in terms of the furlough, that's now resolved. Contractor performance is always an issue, and making sure they perform to an acceptable standard and timely as well. But there was a specific time when they furloughed staff where they just simply weren't doing the work. So we then stepped in at that point.
Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit on customer satisfaction as well. Councillor Whitehead, interestingly, I've been, as a contractor, had the opportunity to look at satisfaction levels in some of our, I suppose you might say competitors, but anyway, other people working in the field, particularly those in the private sector. And one doesn't ever want to be complacent, but we've got statistics here in the 90s where private sector competitors in the 70s and 80s. So, and some of those people, I can't name names obviously, but actually are operating within the borough as well as across the county. So I'm pretty much amazed at the kind of satisfaction levels. If you look, for example, at the satisfaction levels with the repairs, which is delivered across lockdown by people 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, it is a remarkable figure. I mean, these guys are exceptional. They've got a workshop in Dedham. If you haven't been to it, it's really worth visiting. You can see the sheer dedication that a relatively small team has to making perfect doors and shelves and everything else, and going out in the middle of the night and fitting new locks and stuff when the need arises, that we don't see that kind of dedication in other providers. And the key thing is as well that we do at really, really low cost for you. We deliver, and I would say that the slide that we had up of the various quadrants where we're delivering high quality at low cost is a key set of statistics for councillors to look at, because lots of people can deliver high quality at very, very high cost. Lots of people also deliver low quality at high cost. But we've got that set, and it's been hard won. You haven't always seen those indicators in the bottom right-hand quadrant, and they have improved this year even. throughout lockdown. So I have to say it's hats off to the very dedicated staff who have worked incredibly hard during this period that we have the statistics that we do.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for those questions, and that last point in particular was really helpful. Thank you. I have Councillor Barton, and then I'll look for any other comments, and I'm aware of the time, and we may have a break. I'm also aware of the temperature. Councillor Barton, please.
Thank you very much. So just a few observations, really. They are an impressive set of statistics, I must say. And I want to make sure it's recorded that you're congratulated for actually delivering all the maintenance, especially in my ward, Shrub End. That's where I've got the most experience of what you've been doing. But you've been amazing in getting repairs done on time, and particularly people that were waiting for new kitchens. The fact that you've actually delivered them during COVID, I'm absolutely amazed, but I've been invited in to look at one and they're delighted with the outcome. So it was just really to put on record some thanks for that. That's one of the things I wanted to mention. Secondly, you're definitely going in the right direction. A few years ago, we refurbished Walnut Tree House. Again, I'm talking from my own ward experience. And now we've got Elfrida House, which the contrast was just dire. When I visited there in the bathrooms, people are walking to bathrooms in corridors. It was grim, really grim. And the fact that we're going to have a state-of-the-art sheltered housing facility in Shrub End is amazing. So again, that's a good thing. I also wanted to just go back to evictions, because we have had quite an issue with some very difficult tenants that were on the brink of being evicted, and then it all ground to a halt with the government. I just wondered how you supported residents that were really distressed about these people remaining in place during the COVID period, and what's the position now with evictions, because these people really need to go. I just wondered if you had some sort of policy on what you're doing regarding evictions. So that was one point. Now moving to a totally different thing. I'm actually on the board of the Mercury Theatre, and I just want to say that was an incredibly difficult time that we had during the Mercury Rising project. You know, we had deliveries that suddenly didn't appear. We had workmen that were off with COVID. We had escalating costs, which was one of the real worries. But I have to say that the board had total confidence in the project management by Colchester Borough Homes. And I wondered if that's an area that you're expanding on. I'm not quite sure how many projects you manage. I'd just like a bit of an update on how that works, really. But it's worked extremely well for the Mercury Theatre. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I very much appreciate that. In terms of the antisocial behaviour and the evictions, so it has been a very difficult time. I know during the pandemic, we have been able to secure closure orders. So that's in the most extreme cases, often when it relates to drug-related activity. But in terms of evicting, as you have rightly said, there has been that ban on that. I do know that from the work of our ASB team, where they've supported neighbours, our satisfaction level has been exceptionally high. So it's not just about taking action against the individual, it is about keeping the individuals up to date. Communication is often key, and supporting them whilst we do go through that process. But judging by the satisfaction, which actually was 100% with the ASB, I'm confident that the team have done very well in terms of supporting the victims. In terms of where we go, though, I don't think there's going to be any quick fixes. The reason being that when we do go through the process of eviction, where that's absolutely necessary, then there will be a backlog now, and it is going to take us more time to get them through the courts. So where it's what needs to happen, we will take what needs to happen in terms of action, but sometimes we will be delayed because simply the court system is going to get absolutely inundated, I think, not just with ASB, but rent arrears cases nationally. I think there's going to be a bit of a spike. And then finally, in terms of project management, I agree. I've been to the Mercury Theatre, and in fact, we had our AGM there. I think it's incredibly impressive building, something that I think Colchester should be absolutely delighted to have such an amazing building and facility there for local people and people coming to Colchester. CBH is very keen to continue with our project management activity, working very closely with the council. And I know, for example, that's obviously a corporate or a commercial business, an activity, but Elfrida House, we're absolutely at the heart of that. And we'd be very keen to continue with that, that project management going forward, given the opportunities as they come up, working very closely with the council.
Thank you. I've seen no other indications. I've just got a couple of final points to put to you. First of all, whilst you're having the conversation about representation and BME communities, it just made me think about moving on tenants. As much as we want them to be absolutely happy and safe in their properties, sometimes it is right to move them to smaller properties or to adapt the properties. So I just wanted to ask, because it was something when we were investing in buying back properties to ensure they're as accessible as possible, to ensure we have homes for life when we're building properties. So I just wanted to ask about that. Secondly, I also wanted to ask, when I was on the environment panel recently, we were updated that CBH hadn't yet managed to stop the use of glyphosate pesticide chemicals. It's something that under my leadership we were able to ban in CBC use. I just wanted to ask what timeline you hope to use in getting rid of that use. And then lastly, Dirk, to you, as Philip has already said about his first few weeks, in the last 2 years, what have you seen that perhaps you think we can improve on, lessons learnt, and the challenges ahead, to add to what you've already outlined before? Thank you.
Well, if I could pick up on the first question of how do we move people on, one of the greatest incentives to moving people into smaller houses and accommodation is for those smaller houses to be of really high quality. And if I know Councillor Barton has been is aware of how bad the quality was of Elfrida House. I don't know how many of the councillors here have seen Enoch House and Worsnop House. So if you haven't, it's worth going to, because I can tell you it is such high quality that everybody wants to move in there. And I think, you know, we need to create really attractive carrots, you know, in our housing quality. And sheltered housing quality in particular, because the advantages of that, of course, to give dignity to people in their old age, but also to encourage them to give up their 3-bedroomed houses to make way for families who need them more. And there is an absolute focus, unashamedly, of our strategy going forward. I'm sure there are other methods as well. I'm going to hand over to Philip to speak more operationally while I consider my final remarks to your final question.
So perhaps, I mean, just picking up on the other separate point on glyphosate and the use of that in our grounds maintenance activity. We have stopped using it in certain limited locations already. We have an aim to stop using it by next April, where we are still using it. And I know that there was a meeting between CBH staff and council officers last week so that we could pick up and learn from how the council had stopped using it so that we could look to introduce it. So that's absolutely on our radar, Councillor.
Thank you. Back to you, Dirk.
Okay, you didn't give me much time there. Thanks for So what are the things I've seen over the past couple of years? I think when I first took the role on, first of all, we had quite a, dare I say, stuffy board. So we had some skills, but not all the skills. I think we now have all the skills we need. We had a male-dominated board, and I know I didn't really help that, but I think we now have a much more diverse board. We have a great deal of excellent female leadership on that board, which we didn't have before. So in that sense, we've seen a lot of progress. We've also looked very carefully at the way the board is structured. So we had nobody scrutinizing the operations of the CBH. So all the kind of questions that you guys have been asking about repairs and voids and all that, there was no place for people to get their teeth stuck into that kind of detail. We've now created that space, and we have expertise, housing expertise, to be able to really drill down into the detail. So those are improvements that we've made. The area that I feel challenged, or that I'd like to move on further and faster, is to increase residents' voice. Now, I have spoken quite a lot about what we've done there, but I think we need to go further. I think we need to empower our residents more and not be complacent about it. We've got a couple of really fantastic residents on our board, and that has translated into better representation from residents at our Residents' Voice, which, by the way, is the old Residents' Panel rebranded. But it's, as a percentage of the people who live in our homes, it's relatively small. And you know, if there's anything that any of you as local councillors can do to encourage residents to get stuck in and tell us what they need and kick us when we're not delivering, that would be really great. So I think that is a bit of an area that I'd like to go further and faster, at the risk of sounding like Lady Thatcher. I think we really need our residents' voice to be incredibly powerful, because it needs to drive everything we do. We shouldn't be running around asking all the time, which we do, and I'm delighted to. We could do more, I think. A reflection that I have about the past 2 years, to finish off with, and I have found it incredibly moving that throughout lockdown we have referenced it. When we got the requirement to get everybody in, our executive colleagues not only turned around vacant properties to find homes for, at that point, 60 people who were on the streets. They also had to furnish them. They had to find utilities. They literally had 1 week to do this, 1 week. And they went around in taxis because you could only have one person in a car at a time. They rehoused, at that point, 60. It went up to 109 people. And I think I'm right in saying there was only one person who wasn't then permanently accommodated in a long-term home. That is a situation that we should be celebrating collectively. It is a fabulous effort, and my hat goes off to Karen Lohman, who spearheaded that initiative, but also the quite remarkable staff members who went above and beyond to deliver on that initiative. And in terms of the future, we should not allow homelessness on our streets to ever return. If we can do it because there was a pandemic, we need to keep doing it, and we need to keep those people comfortable in permanent housing, because we know that is the way that they are going to flourish. So if there's anything for the future that I'd like to take forward from this 2 years, it's that. It's also a sense of being really ambitious to provide the best possible housing for as many people as possible at the best price. Let me finish by saying we reckon it's possible to build a unit of housing on average for £140,000. Often, the unit of housing is being produced for over £200,000. This is something that we all need to collectively get our heads around, because clearly, if we don't, we will be not maximising the housing potential that we could have across this borough, and it will be a #1 focus of mine and the board's going forward.
Thank you, Dirk. And your penultimate point was really a really positive end to the discussion. But I feel that I think Councillor Willits, you indicated, did you? Just to squeeze in right at the end, please.
Certainly, Chairman. My first question is about the Boston Square on page 24. which I don't fully understand what it means. I see what it indicates, but I don't understand the precisely what it presents. The cost and performance axes give no indication about whether they're exponential or linear. And the opportunity to show us benchmarked against other similar providers has not been presented to the scrutiny panel. And I feel that it would have been useful to have had more information about where we stand in regard to others. I appreciate that when you ask our tenants what they think of Colchester Borough Housing, they have given a very good report. But perhaps in other authorities, they're giving an even better report. I don't know. And I would have thought that this would have been an occasion where you would have presented comparative information about how well Colchester Borough Homes is doing in regard to other ALMOs across the country. And you have mentioned that you are in contact with other ALMOs, and presumably you have their performance or indication of their performance, but that has not been presented on this occasion. So my first question is, can you explain why you've not presented benchmarking information in regard to others? And just give a broad indication of where we are in the absence of that critical information, which I would have expected to have been presented on this occasion.
Yeah, Councillor Willis, I'm delighted to have that question, thank you. And the reason I'm delighted to have it, it affords me the opportunity to boast somewhat about our performance. As you may be aware, I presented to each of the political groups when I first took over as chair, and I presented exactly this set of statistics, house mark statistics, which we get annually. So I know a little bit about it, and the indicators here, all of the indicators in that bottom right-hand quadrant, which are where we have performed, where performance is very good and at very low cost against the various measures, are measured against a group of organisations. I think there are several hundred housing associations and ALMOs across the country, but most particularly weighted in against east of England, and therefore what this shows is our performance relative to those others. Now, we have very dense statistics on all of this, and time did not permit us really to present them given the other rich data that we could have done. But it is a set of data which I'm very proud of. I'd be very happy to share with you personally, but also with anybody else who'd be interested. It was simply a matter of time. And indeed, if the Scrutiny Committee or any other body within this august institution would like more detail, I'm sure Philip and myself and or others would be delighted to share each of the, I think there are 20 indicators in much more detail with you at any time, because it tells an extremely good story for us.
Chairman, I would welcome the opportunity for a personal explanation. As you mentioned, there was more detail on the presentation that you made to the political groups. But this evening, Chairman, we are the scrutiny panel of the council. It is my opinion that it would be helpful if we had more information which showed exactly where Colchester Borough Homes is in relation to others. Now, clearly it's too late to do it this evening. Perhaps the next time we have the benefit of your visit to the scrutiny panel, we could look closer at the quantitative information rather than the qualitative, which is extremely useful. I don't dismiss it, But I think that as a scrutiny panel, we should understand where we are from a benchmarking point of view. But I thank you for your kind offer on that point. My second question, Chairman, really is about the relationship between Colchester Borough Homes and the Borough Council. At times it's described as a partnership, and I can appreciate that we have to work in close partnership. Legally, of course, you are a wholly owned company owned by the Borough Council, where we provide the guarantee under the constitution for your company. On various occasions, you branched out into other things that you do. So can I ask a general question? At the moment, you have a very limited relationship between us and yourselves as a purely a management company. What would you like to see changing in that relationship so that you would feel that you were able to offer more to the borough, more to the community, more to the council? So how do you see, if it was down to you rather than down to us, your relationship with the council developing over the next, say, 5 years?
That's a really interesting question, Councillor Willis. Thank you. I would say that the relationship is in equilibrium. And I wouldn't want to upset that equilibrium. As I understand it, the equilibrium has been somewhat upset in the past. So I'm really keen that we maintain the relationship as it stands. And let me explain how that works for a minute. So you are the member to which we, the board, report effectively. And that's what today is really like, this evening is about. But the mechanics of that are really key. There are formal meetings which go on between officers, appropriately so. There's also a four-way meeting and quarterly between the Chief Executive CBC, the Chief Executive CBH, the cabinet member of the council responsible for housing, and myself. That's a key meeting. There are a number of other meetings which take place in order that the council can scrutinise what we're up to. And I think those are all entirely appropriate. I wouldn't want to change any of those things. So a number of people have asked if there are other things that we can do. It's worth looking at other ALMOs across the whole organisation. Now, some ALMOs have ceased to exist. They've been taken back in-house or been privatised entirely. And that, I think, is a symptom of an ALMO getting the relationship with the council wrong. The council and ALMO relationship at the moment, I think, is absolutely where it needs to be. And therefore, the healthiest position, irrespective of what we deliver for you, is maintaining the relationship in its current form. What we then deliver on your behalf is largely for you to advise us. Now, we can take a view, and we will be taking a view in the strategic review that we're undertaking currently about opportunities which may work for you as a councillor and across the borough, that we think we have the skills and ability to deliver on your behalf. But I think we really have to be sensible about what is working and not wanting to fix something if it's not broken. I think it has almost broken before, and as I understand it, I wasn't here, but these are dark days to which we do not want to return. So I respect the very hard work that has gone on prior to my taking over this office to make sure that the relationship between the council and your ALMO is on the right tracks, and it is incumbent on me and on Philip to maintain that. We will by all means, make suggestions about other things we can do. Now, I welcome that invitation from you. Thank you. But let's do it in partnership and in agreement if we are to expand the remit that you have given us to date.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that is quite enlightening. But I just don't like a situation where we, the council, are always telling you what to do. You have an amazing amount of expertise in this subject, and as part of our scrutiny, you know, it is desirable that we hear of some of your ambitions and where you want to go. Now, as you say, we can remain static with the relationship. The relationship could deteriorate and we take back the housing function, or the relationship could expand in ways which I'm not quite sure at the moment to the benefit of the council. And that has been happening to a certain extent, despite the very limited way you wish to just describe the abilities of your organisation. I mean, one could take the view that you want a single-minded focus, and you said that there are 300 families which urgently need houses, and perhaps that should be your single focus, but that has not been so. You're now doing work on the Mercury, on the Northern Gateway, so you are already expanding your horizons. And having done that, I mean, you must have a view, I'd hope you'd have a view on where you go next, and what else you're going to do to ensure that we get maximum value out of the pool of expertise which you have? Or is it your view that you should just focus on the 300 families that need housing and just concentrate on those and nothing else?
I'll just bring in Lindsay and then would want to wrap up shortly. So Lindsay and then to...
Just to bring some...
Chairman, can I just come back? Why do we want to wrap up? I mean, you made a 10-minute political speech earlier on about your achievements as leader, and now you want to cut me short on my questioning. Can I object to that?
You can if you want, but
I do so then.
We said at the start at 9:30 we would have a break, and that I would take a consensual opinion on that. So I will take that, and that's what I was going to. Thank you. I don't need to be told about how long I was speaking for. Lindsay.
I was just going to bring some Colchester Borough Council perspective to what I think is a very interesting question. And I think from our perspective, the relationship is very mature. And I would completely agree that I think we're in a place to have some very challenging discussions. I think the only point I wanted to make, so I don't need to make all the points that Dirk has already made, which I think are very valid, is that we have a very, very challenging time ahead of us within the HRA, and we all share the responsibility around achieving an HRA business plan that is able to achieve all of the things that we've talked about today. So tackling a lot of the issues that we've discussed, but it's not limitless. So the HRA, as you well know, having been all of you, most of you within the council for many years, is a finite resource that we need to make sure that we're meeting all of our priorities. So that strategic conversation that we have with Colchester Borough Homes is always about where do we put our investment and our energy between us to ensure that we're meeting all of the key challenges and the priorities. And I absolutely can assure you, in the strategic conversation I had with Colchester Borough Homes, there's no lack of ambition. I think the board, my sense of the board is that it's very strong. And I've worked with many different housing boards over the years, and I think the independent expertise they've brought in really strengthens and provides some really excellent challenge to some of the thinking. But they've also got some very confident and vocal tenants on that board, which I think is a real strength. So I was incredibly impressed with the discussion I had with them about what's the opportunities in the future, and how do we start the strategic conversation for the next 5 years. So there's absolutely no lack of ambition. I think our collective job is to ensure that what we set out to achieve within some challenging, kind of financial constraints, making sure that homes are safe and warm and affordable and as plentiful as possible, have to remain at the heart of what we do. and everything else is absolutely laudable, but we've got to make sure that we achieve what we can achieve within the finite resources. So, I think from the council's perspective, Councillor Willits, I'm very confident of the relationship and being able to have some very honest conversations about those challenges as we go forward that have already started.
Thank you, Chairman. Will you permit me another question, please?
Yes, I was going to see if Dirk wanted to come back on that at all.
So I was just going to say, Councillor Willits, that you will see some of our ambition emerging over the next months. We expect to be able to present to anybody who's interested in it a strategic plan for the future early in the new year. It is its early draft is about to be birthed, but we would like to hear from others of their ambitions for us, because we have our own ambitions, but it is important to ride tandem into the future merrily, delivering for your constituents. I'm keen that we do that.
My next question, it concerns the three-way triangle between the Borough Council, Colchester Borough Homes and Amphora. We scrutinised the Colchester Commercial Holdings fairly recently, and when they did a sort of similar presentation, the 100 houses were claimed as their achievement, yet in your presentation, the 100 houses are claimed as your achievement. So can I ask where you see the boundaries of Colchester Borough Homes and the commercial holding companies being, because it would appear that you are doing work in terms of maintenance, and perhaps they're doing work in terms of provision, but from my perception, there seems to be a potential overlap between what you're doing. Now, an overlap may be good, it may be we're just doubling up in certain areas to do twice as much. But there is always a danger when we have various independent wholly owned companies which are overlapping in their function, and there is not necessarily clarity there. So do you have a view on how the triangular relationship is going to work out?
So we stray into dangerous territory, and I would have to say it's not for me to have a view. However, I would simply say that there's a conversation that's worth having if you believe that boundaries can change. As you rightly point out, we have a lot of skill, but we are set up very differently to other organizations, and it's important that we work well together. I don't think it's for me to really opine at this point on other organizations and their remits, and I absolutely recognize the place of Colchester Borough Homes being reporting to you as our member.
Councillor Willits, if it helps, I could probably just give you a little bit more around the 100 homes. So I think that's quite a good example of where we've been doing some collaboration. So the purchase of properties and the plan and the strategic setup and all the agreement around the funding was facilitated through the council. And then the delivery of them and ensuring that they are up to the standards that Colchester Borough Homes have talked about this evening, and then able to be let through the process to those in greatest need, is managed by Colchester Borough Homes. So it's very much a collaborative process. And I would say from the client side, because I oversee the client services, that everybody who plays their part in that are clear of their part. The delays in the delivery have not been to do with the process. They have been to do with the ability to purchase properties and the increase in demand in the market for properties, and therefore the increase in prices. So it's not been to do with the process and people understanding roles. So my experience from client side, managing both the client relationship with the company and with Colchester Borough Homes, is that it currently works well. But there are always opportunities to look as we go forward further.
Thank you. At this point, I think that those are all the questions, and we do need to have a break. So I thank the people who have attended virtually, Matt and Karen. I thank you, Philip and Dirk, and thank you, Lindsay, for assisting as well. It's been a good session, a long session, a bit cold at times, but thank you for your warm input. So we have been asked to review the performance. I just need to go to the recommendations, or Owen, if you get to it quicker than I do, please tell me. So the actions are to, again, review the performance, and we're invited to make any recommendations to the portfolio holder for planning and housing. I feel that we've given you some ideas and things to think about, and Lindsay, if you could take those back. I do not see any official recommendations otherwise coming from the panel. So just the reflections and conclusions that we've all put forward this evening that you could all take back, but Lindsay as well, to the portfolio holder would be really helpful. Okay, thank you all. We will move on and we will have a break. I have communicated with officers about the temperature in here. Sadly, due to some flue maintenance, we are unable to have the heating on. So if we go and warm up and get some hot drinks, and we can also explain to the public, if we have coats on, there's a good reason for it. Okay, see you in, it's now 9:50. Can we get back and seated before 8 o'clock, please? Right, 1 minute warning, everybody. Okay, let's restart the meeting. Thank you. Hopefully we all have a warm drink. The heating in the town hall isn't working due to maintenance on the flue, the chimney. And if worse comes to worse, we might need to robe up in the council's civic robes to keep warm. Moving on, item 11, the Local Council Tax Support Scheme 2022 to 2023. For this item, we have Jason Granger here this evening, and we have Councillor Littermore as well with her resources portfolio hat on. So, Sue, I'll look to you first and then ask if you want to go straight to Jason or up to you. So, good evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're feeling a little bit warmer after your coffee. Just thank you all for receiving this evening. I'd like to thank all the officers that have been involved in this. Obviously, we go through it, and then if anybody has any questions, we will both do our best to answer them for you.
Thank you, Sue. Jason.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'll give a brief summary of the paper. This is to put a proposal to scrutiny for the Local Council Tax Support Scheme effective the 1st of April next year. So that's the 1st of April 2022. The paper outlines the support we currently offer to 9,500 residents across the borough. And it explains that the scheme offers a level of entitlement which helps people who need a bit of extra support paying their council tax liability. Colchester Borough Council has the scope to change entitlement for those of working age, but not of those of pensionable age. That's set by central government. The scheme is fully funded in the MTFF, and we are proposing, through consultation with the portfolio holder and Paul Cook, our head of finance, a no change position for 2022 to maintain entitlement at the levels that it has been. The reason and rationale for this is that it is the time to continue supporting residents as the fiscal effects of COVID unfold. And alongside this, we will take a very careful assessment of caseloads and review our position, particularly in January, at the beginning of the new year, and to look at our estimates of caseload increases that we have best predicted. But the position is a no change. We are not increasing nor decreasing entitlement. We're keeping them where they are. The funding of the scheme will follow the precept share. And that is in line with a draft policy document that we have attached. It is a technical document, and we've also committed to review that for accuracy and detail and correctness alongside this piece of work. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And it's not the first year we've kept it the same as a borough council, and I know it is a generous scheme compared to others. Looking around, I've seen an indication from Councillor Bourne, no others yet. So Councillor Bourne, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for your opening statements, and thank you for the report, which is it's one of those reports that has an enormous amount of appendices of a very short report. But it is very important to those residents who, and we appreciate very important to those residents who, as is mentioned in this strategic plan, tackle the causes of inequality and support our most vulnerable people. So while on the outset, it feels as though it's a good thing not to change the criteria and keep stability to the scheme and not reducing the amount, I'm just wondering, what metrics did you look at to decide to keep the status quo? Are we still one of the most generous local authorities in Essex in applying, or if not the most generous, in applying a council tax scheme? What are the other districts and boroughs doing? It may be that we're going early on this, earlier than the other districts and boroughs, but we do normally meet up with them in the officer group or the portfolio holder group to find out what else is going across the patch. My query also is around point 9.2. So the assumption that 12.5% increase on uptake was taken versus pre-COVID levels was already assumed in the 21-22 budget setting. We already had that. Of course, we are also moving into a period of instability on household incomes now, where the most vulnerable, the poorest, will be hit the hardest and will be bearing the burden of two things, which is the reduction in universal credit, £20 a week, and also hugely rising utility prices, gas and electric, and many of our residents who are suffering from that will also be on prepayment meters. We've had many discussions on this panel before about the unfairness of that. It is expensive to be poor. In 9.2, it states the position will be reviewed in the budget report to 26th of January 2022 Cabinet. Which position? Is it the council's position on uptake, just the figures, because that's not helpful to the poorest? Is it we look at the provision and we change nothing, because that's not helpful to the poorest? What is the appetite in your discussions on amending medium-term financial forecast for this line in the budget on council tax support?
Thank you, Councillor. On your first point around colleagues across Essex, we have consulted with colleagues across Essex, and we consult with them regularly through a monthly meeting that we have with the leads across Essex. Our scheme is currently still one of the most generous across Essex, and I've updated the portfolio holder on our position and the likelihood of others across Essex making changes. And there doesn't appear to be a strong appetite across our colleagues across Essex to change their schemes. But obviously the governance arrangements do vary. We're coming to scrutiny fairly early in the governance process. So just a word of caution there, others may make a late change, but that is the position. Moving to the second point around the assumptions and caseload increases, we have a bit of headroom from where we are We're not quite at the 12.5% currently in year. So we've given ourselves some room, and this was a debate we had with the portfolio holder and the head of finance for some time in our meetings around, we want to track very carefully our assumptions that are built into the budget. So currently we're not at the 12.5%, but we've assumed the same position going forward for the 22-23 tax year. And I think the point around January was just to keep a close eye and a close hold on the impacts as the shockwaves from COVID unfold. So the key takeaway, Councillor, is that we still have headroom in the current financial year. We're not quite at 12.5%, but we have prudently forecast for a further 12.5% in the next fiscal year. So we're not saying we're going to carry forward what we're currently seeing. We've given some further room. Does that help at all? I could give more accurate figures. I haven't got quite them on, but we're around 7% on a caseload increase currently in year.
Okay, so is the impact that we're predominantly concerned with the impact on our caseload as a local authority? Because I'm interested on the impact of household incomes and how we can help the most vulnerable who are going to struggle this winter. So, you know, where will the change be made? Are we able to be even more generous in January? Will that notification be too late? Or is this just an accounting on a piece of paper, really? You know, what is in it? Where is the place to intervene once we find out what the impact on household incomes is going to be over the winter period?
This scheme will be set in full council in December. The review in January is in relation to our forecasts on caseload, so our scheme generosity or level of support will be set in December. However, our fiscal burden could increase or decrease depending on the number of claims. And that's a piece of finance projections that will be held in January. So we cannot control that, but our eligibility criteria will be set by December by full council. But this is one stream, I would say, against you know, local council tax support is one way that the council can support residents on a low income. And I'm aware my executive director, Pam Donnelly, is working on a piece around winter resilience and how the council is supporting on a lot more streams than just this. But you are correct, councillor, that entitlement will be fixed in December, and that cannot be changed until the next fiscal year.
So that's very clear. So the impact is really the impact on us as a local authority with our caseload. We're not reviewing the impact on household incomes and making the scheme more generous. This is the scheme as it is. It won't be coming back to scrutiny. It will be set in December. Okay, so I'm not sure what recommendations I have around that. I'll have a think about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. I have similar questions around that, but I've got Councillor Pauline Hazel first, please. Pauline.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hello, Jason. It's very good to see you after all this time of pandemic. I haven't a specific question, more along the lines of customer services and the role you have. You're always having to look for solutions, and from my years of shadowing customers, you've always done it extremely well. And I think we have so many variables at the moment, we just don't really know how much and what and where we will need to put our resources. I do believe it's essential that we maintain the level of council tax support, local council tax support that we have. I think that's a minimum. And I certainly look forward to the December full council when we get more information on the scheme. But from my knowledge of the way the department works, I have no doubt that you're going to surprise us with just how much you will achieve. And I hope the council will support the work you're doing. I'm sure it will going forward, because we have so many different problems that we may be facing and we do not know yet what they will be. So wish you well in all that you're going to be doing and are doing currently. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, can I just add very quickly, of course, we don't know what the winter is going to bring us. We do not know, COVID related, we do not know weather related. Obviously, if we have a cold spell, that's a huge increase in people's heating needs, electricity needs. So we do not know what we're going to face this winter. One little sort of bright star on the horizon, though, is the Community 360 building opening in the old Poundland store, opposite where Argos used to be. I'm a huge believer in us all working together, and the more that we can do that, the greater help we're going to be able to give to residents in need. So I'm really enthusiastic about that building, about us all working together, so that if residents have particular difficulties, they'll feel that they can go to places like that, where they can get expert advice from lots of different fields, not just from Colchester Borough Council, but from absolutely everybody, and get the best experience that they possibly can and the best help they can.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Pauline. I see your indication, Dennis. I'll just ask some questions and then bring you in. Jason, I also am very aware of your work and appreciate everything you and your teams do and have experience of this process. On the same lines as Councillor Bourne, I suppose I am always aware that you'd like to be very organised with getting this policy in early and before the final date, which I believe is in the new year. I just wondered if there was any, at least ability from you and political appetite to look at whether or not we can judge by December whether we can have two different potential policies. If for example, the discount is increased, could it go a bit higher because we are seeing so many people struggling? Could you go with a twin track policy until the final cut-off date? And I just wondered whether that's something that you have looked into, or politically, Councillor Mitchell, or looking at options available to you on that basis, because I do, as Councillor Bourne has said, really worry about the multiple factors that will hit people. And I know, Jason, you fully understand that you have to get it right in terms of the ability for people to pay their council tax. This discount has to be at the right level, and we want people to contribute as much as possible towards their council tax. But if reducing it, the amount they pay, by increasing the discount, for example, I'm not saying you should, to 15%, then would that mean more people would be able to pay and your figures will actually go up? So I just wanted to see if there was any further leeway in either doing a twin track or just waiting until the last minute, really, to see what the effects had been of at least a few more months of winter. Thank you. I'll let you answer those and then go to Councillor Willett.
Thank you, Chair. There is a statutory deadline for us to form a scheme, and it is prudent to be in advance of that. Traditionally, we have settled this scheme by the end of the year, and it's a decision that we take in collaboration with our finance leads as well. And to reach a position of where we are today has involved a comprehensive piece of work, which really started some months ago. And that delaying the timetable would present some risk of protracting the period. I'm not saying we would default, but if we didn't form a scheme by a particular date, we would require to adopt a standardised scheme that central government provide. So I am just flagging there is a risk associated with a delay, and we have gone through an extensive period of consultation with key stakeholders internally to date, but the point around political appetite, I'll leave to my portfolio holder.
Thank you. The council needs surety. It needs to know where it is financially. Whilst it would be idyllic to have some financial flexibility depending on the severity of COVID or the severity of the weather, that is not financially prudent for the council. Speaking to the customer service operatives, the feeling was that this is at about the right level. It's high enough to help those that are really in need. So that left me confident that the scheme should stay as it is, that there shouldn't be a drop, that there shouldn't be an increase, because the people that are actually there speaking to residents who are in need felt that it was about right.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. I suppose, as some of us have said, there's a worsening possibly with the universal credit £20 uplift being taken away and gas bills, but I appreciate your answer, so I'll leave that there. Thank you. Councillor Willits, please.
Chairman, my point of question is very much like my previous one. Scrutiny panel is a sort of mask of Janus, looking in both directions. We're looking inwardly into the council and the borough to see what is the best arrangement for the local tax support scheme, given that it seems to be befuddled all round by government regulations and we have only limited flexibility, as has been explained, and those explanations are very clear and we understand. But we've also heard mention of the scheme in relation to those of other councils in the county or nearby. And again, I think I would encourage all who come to the scrutiny panel, when they have an opportunity, to add their benchmarking so that we are able to understand how our scheme, the Colchester scheme, which is there principally to serve the residents of the borough who need this support, but at the same time we can see how it fares in regard to the schemes of other adjacent councils. And I think that is such an important point in our scrutiny. And I hope, Chairman, that you will encourage those type of benchmarkings to be produced whenever possible, and particularly on schemes where we do well, such as this, where we are perhaps one of the leading councils. We should have the data which shows that we are being as sympathetic as we can be, given the rules which really prescribe the action that has to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. I think on the last item, your point about benchmarking was taken on board, and I think it's useful here today as well. Jason, your answer earlier was we go earlier than many other councils, so it's harder to see, but I think especially at this time, bearing in mind the other questions we've had, it's important. So I'll let you answer if you can, Councillor Willits' point, but also take a direction. I don't see any dissent from that from councillors, that Councillor Willits' point about comparative data is very useful. I know that has been presented before in these schemes, especially if you were making more significant changes to it. Anyway, I'll hand over to you, see if there's any further statements. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. The benchmarking data was provided to the portfolio holder, and I note the comments regarding entering this into the formal reports. I can work with the portfolio holder to present some of that within the cabinet report, if that would be particularly useful, so it's in the public domain. But I can assure you that, or give some reassurance that the position across Essex was carefully considered because of the interrelation this scheme has with Essex County Council as well, because it does completely follow the precept share. So it's important to look at all the dependencies across Essex. So I will ensure that I'll work with the portfolio to see if we can expand the cabinet report to include some benchmarking and data across Essex as we know it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jason. I think that's appreciated from the panel, and especially Councillor Willits for putting that forward. I think we'll appreciate that being written into the report. Okay, I don't see any other indications. So once again, thank you, Councillor Lissamore. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to your whole team. As we all know, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with this, and especially when it comes to implementation and the hardship funds that go alongside this as well. So you helping people to pay and to stay within their housing. Okay, thank you. I see no other comments. So we need to, again, go to the recommendations. Which are to review and comment on the scheme, which we have done. And again, comment ahead of the Cabinet meeting in November. You've just provided us with one particular recommendation that you'll take forward. So I don't think we need to make a formal recommendation, Owen, because I think that was acknowledged. And Jason's nodding, and I think Sue is in agreement with that too. So we've had that input, and you've heard the rest of what we had to say. So no formal recommendations. We've noted the report, we've reviewed, we commented. So thank you. Good luck taking it forward to Cabinet, and we'll see it again at full council. Thank you. The next item, item 12, is the budget strategy. So we welcome Councillor Lissamore staying in her chair. And we do hope to have Paul Cook, the head of finance, but he had some trouble with his connection, but he can hear us now. He is nodding and he's waving. So excellent. And we have Dan Gascoigne, the Chief Operating Officer, in support as well. We have the report and we also have Councillor King ready as a guest councillor speaking. I think I'll take the report first and then go to Councillor King, if that is okay. So Sue or Paul, who's going to start?
Just again, a quick thank you to officers. Obviously, this is an ongoing week upon week upon week, looking at the budget strategy and moving forward. It's something we discuss, obviously, a lot. But I'd like to thank the officers for all the work that they've put in, especially, you know, through these COVID times, and offer you the report.
Thank you, Paul. At this point, I'll ask you to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to run briefly through the report, this does demonstrate very good progress towards next year's budget. There's a significant level of transformation savings already achieved, which are set out in the report and the appendix. Good progress on permanently increasing the locality budgets back to their previous level, and in support for arts partners. A number of delegations sought in the report to take forward business rates pool, to determine the use of reserves and to set the tax base. And then in recommendation 2.9, that as with other Essex authorities, we opt into public sector audit appointments for the 23-24 audit appointments. Some risks set out in the report, particularly in this section on budget assumptions at the end, where we have slightly increased the pay inflation assumption. Some of the assumptions we won't fully understand until we get nearer to January Budget Council. So we're hoping that some areas such as council tax collection and LCTS take-up, that we may be able to make our assumptions more favourable. But in summary, I think a very satisfactory state of progress at this stage of the budget timetable, and would recommend the report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I will now bring in visiting councillor. Councillor King, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, a bit quiet, but we can hear you.
Then I shall speak a little louder for you, Chair. It's been a long evening for everybody, and I'll try not to extend it any more than I hope is helpful. As the outgoing portfolio holder and one who had a close engagement with Onside and the potential for a youth zone, I'd just like to sort of touch very briefly from my perspective how this looks and just talk to the youth zone positioning and how it's described in 7.4 to try and correct some misunderstandings that could arise and have arisen from the way the shorthand is within that paragraph. So first of all, on the wider piece, this is for your judgment, of course, but from my perspective, and I have talked to the officers recently, this is really welcome progress. It's a step on from where we were when we had the councillor briefing, and it's good to see the table of assumptions and acknowledge, as Paul Cook has stated, that of course we'll find out, won't we, how real that they are as we watch inflation as just one illustration of pressure. But the real thing I wanted to spend just a few minutes of your time on is really the issue and the numbers on the youth zone. Now, I went back and looked at the ones, I knew them well enough, that we had plugged into the budget process in the run-up to beginning of the year when we set the budget, and which we'd shared with councillors. And I was pleased to see that although much is falling away, including hair, that I did have those numbers correct. I have, however, checked with Onside. So just to be clear, the youth zone wouldn't cost, as has been publicly stated, £1 million a year. The revenue cost to CBC would be 400k a year. I accept that there is, if money is borrowed, a borrowing cost as well, but the number itself is 400k. With a contractual commitment for the first 3 years. Onside would be accepting under a typical arrangement that they would have to raise at least 800k a year of sustainable funding. And that's without looking at what other investors and other public agencies might be able to provide. So I think it's really important that we understand that in terms of revenue cost, although we might refer to any number we like, including the one that's stated at 1.3 million, the reality is that for Colchester, in terms of what had been explored and what would typically be agreed, we were looking at a commitment of 400k a year for 3 years, which is less than the 1.3 that's stated. It is true, of course, that you have to build it, and that's shifted and changed, and we might all expect that those costs might rise. But as stated before, subject to the process that lies ahead, if this goes ahead, there would be a one-off capital commitment from CBC of around 4.2 million, which is half the capital cost. And of course, certainly before, we had this identified in terms of levelling up funds. The town fund for a period had an allocation, and central government, which is a big fan and supporter of youth zones, has been providing directly support, both for revenue and also for capital. So I think it's really important that whatever lies ahead, and to me, it's important that we keep this apolitical if we can, and that we explore this together if we can. That we do start with a very clear understanding of the numbers. And as I say, I think that would be helpful if after this session we could, before this goes to Cabinet or after it goes to Cabinet, before it goes further to full council, that we have at the very least a fuller understanding of what the reality is around these numbers. Now, the real issue is the withdrawal of that funding allocation of 400k. So I'm not talking about what might lie ahead. The fact is that provision in the medium term has been taken out. I can only make the recommendation, mindful that we are a couple of years away, even if this were to proceed at pace, and it's not at the moment, that's clear. We're a couple of years away from incurring that liability for real. I think I wouldn't say it's a courtesy, it's not the right way of putting it, but I think it would be a reasoned thing to do if there is any prospect of a joint cross-party agreement on the way ahead with the youth zone, that we keep in the medium-term financial forecast and allocation pending the results of those conversations. It's the reverse of the approach taken, which is to take it out, is to keep it in. I accept that. So that's it for me, Chair. I'll leave for you and your colleagues the conversation that lies ahead around the wider piece. It's really good to see the progress. I congratulate the officers on what they've been able to achieve, and the portfolio holder, of course. But I asked for a change on the medium-term financial forecast. I think that's in the spirit of past discussions on this. And I do ask that we correct what could be misunderstood when it comes to the reality of the extent of that commitment. It is much smaller than could be read and understood from looking at the paper. My thanks to you all.
Thank you, Councillor King. We'll move to the report, but before I do, Councillor Lismore or Paul Cook, could you help respond to Councillor King's points, please?
Yes, certainly. With regards to the youth zone, no other partner believes that this is viable within the next few years. Now, I will ask the question, which of course is political. You were in control here for a long period of time. Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you allocate funds? Why did you not allocate a site? Look at the land next to First Site. Doesn't that scream out to you, youth zone? But no, you didn't. So we are where we are now. And if I was hearing from our partners, this is a goer, this is doable, I think our vision would be different, but it's not. Others are saying, other partners are saying, we do not think that this is viable in the current climate. Now, the other issue as a double hatter is that youth services do not come under Colchester Borough Council. Youth services come under Essex County Council. We have to ask ourselves then, why should we be dabbling in something which we do not offer? It would be like Essex coming along with a refuse truck and starting collecting rubbish for us. Why should we dabble with something that is not something that we work with? I am far keener to work with Essex County Council to see what their plans are. And as a previous chair of the Youth Strategy Group, I know about the townhouse. I believe the townhouse is underutilised. I went on the virtual tour of the youth zone, and almost everything they pointed out to me, I thought, we've got that. That's the townhouse. We've got that. That's the townhouse again. We have a purpose-built building which I believe is underutilised. And I think far more needs to be done. And I'm hoping the funding that is coming to the townhouse will go somewhere to bring it up to standards and bring it to the attention of young people. My 3 children never went to the townhouse. They never heard of it. They didn't have anything that was going on in it. That's wrong. We've got a perfect position in the centre of town on major bus routes, a purpose-built building, and I believe it's not being utilised enough. So we have to work with Essex County Council and ensure that the townhouse, as it stands at the moment, is utilised to the best possible standards for the young people. So that is my position. I'm very, very willing to work, particularly with Councillor Louise McKinley at County, to see what Essex can do. But we do not have a site and we do not have the money. We had our budget review the other night, where we asked other councillors, you know, what would you cut if you had the youth zone? That's a simple question, and no one can come up with the answer to that, because we don't actually want to cut anything to fund a youth zone. Going around the virtual youth zone as we did, I noticed that a lot of the funding they talked about was from businesses, which was brilliant. And they had a sort of a big plaque up on the wall with all the names of the, you know, multi-million-pound businesses that supported them, not just financially, but by nurturing young people, by mentoring young people. I think one of the problems that we have in Colchester is we don't have those types of businesses here. There are very, very few large multi-million-pound businesses that would be prepared to help to fund. So Councillor King can speak about, well, it's only 400k. It's only 400k at the moment, and that is with some business help as well. If that business help didn't come through, it would be more. We know inflation's going up. We know certainly building costs are going up. That's not just going to be 400k. That's going to go up more and more and more. So my position is we continue talking about this, but we continue talking about it with Essex County Council.
Thank you, Councillor Lissamore. I will try to come back on some of that. You did put a challenge, which I think perhaps was directed in my direction. So we resolved through the scrutiny panel with a consensual process when looking at the town deal, 2 points, 2 recommendations that went to Cabinet. Point A was that the scrutiny panel takes on the role of scrutinising the council's role and actions as accountable body for Colchester's town deal programme, including oversight of risk management and scrutiny of financial decisions. As a Cabinet, you agreed to that. Secondly, you saw our recommendation B, and Cabinet, including yourself, changed and edited that to read this, which you then agreed. Cabinet includes investigation into funding of the youth zone as part of ongoing budget setting process, and works with members and budget workshops to identify estimated 400,000 to 1.3 annual revenue costs necessary, a suitable site and capital funding alongside the town deal allocation for funding for youth services provision, mindful of legal requirement to deliver a balanced revenue budget. That's what Cabinet agreed to. I'm pleased that you've continued on the budget workshops where the £400,000 allocated in the medium to financial term forecast was described. However, I go back to that resolution that we put forward to Cabinet, and Cabinet gave reason for it to be amended, A being left but B being amended. The reasoning, which is also explained in the minutes, is Cabinet considered that it was important that there was oversight by the scrutiny panel of the council's role as an accountable body for the town deal. In the view of the potential revenue costs of a youth zone, there needed to be a complete political support from all groups as to how the savings needed should be secured to achieve a balanced budget. It was proposed that suggestions as to how these savings could be achieved should be considered at the forthcoming budget workshops. We haven't had any other budget workshops yet, but you have taken this out of the financial forecast. The medium-term financial forecast looks at years ahead. There seems to be no financial reason why you would take something out that is in there, potentially, from our recommendation to be possibly matched by Cabinet to go with the town deal funding. It doesn't concur with the recommendation that we put to Cabinet, and you agreed that you would work with members and at the budget workshop on this particular allocation. Instead, you are taking it out without any consultation. I will repeat again, because it is in a later year of the medium-term financial forecast, it does not actually provide any pressure on the budget this year or the forthcoming year. So why is it being taken out? That seems to be a political decision that actually avoids the recommendation that we put to you as Cabinet, which you amended and then agreed to.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. It is a financial decision. I'm not quite sure of the date of that and the date that the Town Deal announced that they were withdrawing their support. I'm not quite sure how that works together. So was that statement made before the Town Deal withdrew their support, or was it made afterwards?
This is the scrutiny meeting we had in August, where we scrutinised the Town Deal and we scrutinised the youth services part of that. We then provided recommendations to your Cabinet meeting on September the 1st. So you have then agreed that quite a few months after the Town Deal allocation was made. So I'll correct you there. What happened is you've had all this information put to you from the scrutiny panel. You've agreed it, resolved A and B with an edit in September, quite a long time after the allocation from the Town Deal was agreed. And you have in that agreed to working with members and at budget workshops to identify the estimated 400,000 revenue costs. That hasn't happened, I'm afraid. So what you're doing is you're going against the recommendation made by scrutiny and accepted by your Cabinet.
So let's go back to the budget workshop then. What solutions came from other members of all political parties at that budget workshop to cut what has got to be cut if we're going to fund this in the future?
It's usually I and members ask the questions, but I will help you with that. So at the moment, we haven't had that opportunity at the budget workshops going forward.
I'm sorry, I will interject there. We had a budget workshop. There are more planned, yes. We had a budget workshop. Not a single suggestion was put forward by any councillor of any party on how we can cut other services to pay for this. The only suggestion, the only moan I remember was from Councillor Lilly, who said, I don't know really why I've turned up for this, because you haven't told us what you're going to do. And I explained to him that was not the point of the budget workshop. I think that was the only proactive conversation that I had with any other councillor of all political parties. Not a single councillor came up with any suggestions about what is going to be cut to pay for this youth zone if it was going to stay. Now we have more budget workshops coming up. Perhaps that position will change. And if it does, we will reassess. But at present, and because youth services do not come under the audit of Colchester Borough Council, I believe the way forward is to work with Essex County Council, work in the short term with the townhouse and the funding, the extra funding that we have through the Town Deal for that. But in the long term, let's look at what we can do with Essex, because they are the services that give to youth, not us.
Thank you. What I would suggest is that due to the recommendation put to you as a Cabinet and agreed by you as a Cabinet to enable members through the budget workshops to identify that 400,000 going forward, that we are able to do that, and then it's not taken out of the medium-term financial forecast. In terms of when that budget pressure will start falling, we have time in order to affect change and to look at how we make savings that will enable us to close that £400,000 gap. That £400,000 gap does not start affecting us at this point going forward in this budget cycle.
Okay, I will suggest it does, because this is a medium-term forecast, financial forecast. We have to look at what we are going to cut to pay for this. And that is not a simple question. That is not something we can suddenly pluck 400,000 or however much it's going to be out of the air. in one lump sum and say, that's it. We can't cut one whole service of something else that we already do and say we're going to cut that completely. That'll save us at least 400. That's going to go into youth services. Now, the recommendations from the financial officers are that this is removed from the MTFF. Perhaps I can bring Paul in now for him to give his recommendations, but certainly that is what I have been told by the financial officers of Colchester Borough Council.
Thank you, Sue. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. As it states in 7.4, the funding has been withdrawn pending discussions with the County Council and other stakeholders, and does identify the potential cost. In setting the budget for 22-23, we need to complete a robustness statement, not only in terms of that year's budget, but the budget in the long term is financially sustainable for the council. And if we look in this report, following the removal of that funding in 23-4 and later years, we still, as Councillor Lissamore has said, have very significant gaps going forward, which we have to address. So at this stage, I think it is appropriate that that funding proposal is removed, pending further discussions, both internally and externally, in an effort to address this difficult situation and balance the budget for next year in the longer term. I hope that's useful.
Thank you. I do appreciate that contribution, but I would refer us back to the recommendation that we had here and the wording of B, which I won't go through again. So I'll leave it at this point, but as I say, would be going against a recommendation that we put to Cabinet and was agreed by Cabinet. I will move to any other speakers at this point. Councillor Willits, please.
Chairman, looking at the table 11.9 in the report, it is populated only for the immediate future. So the effect of cost pressures, the effect of savings is not predicted accurately for the next, the years following next year. But nevertheless, it shows a particularly worrying trend when one looks at the cumulative budget gap. And I would ask the portfolio holder whether she thinks perhaps that paragraph 7 dealing with budgetary pressures is perhaps a little light in terms of its analysis of what is needed to contain the escalating costs which are represented in 11.9, bearing in mind that eventually each of those years has to come down to a zero budget. If I can also make some remarks in support of the chairman's criticism of the way the youth zone project is going. I walk past the townhouse on a very regular basis. It's on my route to Castle Park, which I walk around several times a week. And I despair when I look at that building, the state of it, the way it's being used, and surely it is ripe and ready to be converted into a youth zone. At the meeting where we scrutinised the town deal, we asked questions of the Chief Executive about whether it would be possible to go ahead with a youth zone under the Council's general powers of competence, acknowledging that Essex is the lead authority, but we certainly have powers to do so if we wish. Although it would appear that if we did that, we would have to meet the 400k that is mentioned in the papers, plus any of the other costs which one might have expected from other partners. And I think it was the Chief Executive's view that it was going to rapidly head up towards £1 million a year. and that was ignoring the financing costs of finding a building. It was perhaps, Chairman, a bit of a get out for the scrutiny panel to recommend that it should be left to the member working groups to come up with a solution for this, because certainly at the first of these special meetings for members to consider the budget, as the portfolio holder said, there seemed very little appetite to discuss anything, let alone the pressing matter of the youth zone. So I wonder whether as a scrutiny panel we could recommend that a special working group, I don't know what its status would be, whether it would be a task and finish group, to actually look at the issue of the youth zone, because it must have sort of two essential features of its remit. One is to decide how a youth zone could be implemented, and B, to come up with how it is going to be funded. And just to make general remarks that money will be found in later budgets, given the precarious position that we see in 11.9, that is not enough. We need something concrete if the council really wishes to go forward with a youth zone. And I think we need to have some very careful and very specific thinking about the way it could be done. And if a way cannot be found, there is no point in browbeating the portfolio holder to do something which she is saying is impossible at this stage. So I think really the choices are either we accept as a scrutiny panel what the portfolio holder has said, that it's a difficult problem, collaborative working with Essex might appear at some later point in the programme, or we try and nail members' feet to the ground and say, if you want a youth zone, you will have to make savings in excess of what is shown in line 4 of table 11.9. There's some pretty tough decisions there to meet those savings, and we would have to be even tougher in terms of finding other things which could be reduced to liberate funds for a youth zone. You can't do it both ways, Chairman. So in phrasing what we're going to say back to Cabinet from the scrutiny panel, I think we need to be really specific that those who wish to promote a youth zone have got to come up with the goods on how it is going to be done, rather than just vaguely waving their hands in the direction of the portfolio holder and saying, can you do it, please?
Thank you, Councillor Willett. Councillor Lissamore, anything on that before I go to others?
Only what Councillor Willett says, sort of, I'm trying to sort of personalise this. How would a resident, a normal household deal with this? I want a Porsche. I've always wanted a Porsche. In the 80s, I had pictures of red Porsches all around my bedroom. I've always wanted a Porsche. If I really, really wanted a Porsche, I would have to stop going out. I'd have to stop buying clothes. I'd have to make cuts in my budget. And eventually, one day, I might, with a little bit of help, just have enough money for that Porsche. We're in that same position in this council. You tell us what to cut to fund this youth service. You tell us what to do, and we will look very, very seriously at it. But I believe the future is working collaboratively, especially with Essex County Council. And I will add to Councillor Willett saying we need money to build it, we need money to run it. We need a site for it as well. That's the other problem that we have. Other sites in the rest of the country are in areas of deprivation. So we could say, right, let's build it in the middle of Greenstead. How do you young people from Shrub End get to Greenstead? We have this issue with site, as well as money to build it, as well as money to run it. This is not an easy solution, but the budget workshops will continue, and if councillors come up with sensible solutions on how to balance the MTFF moving forward, including the money for the youth zone, I will do everything in my power to ensure that we look at that as seriously as possible. And it can therefore come back in. But we have to work out what we're going to cut to pay for it when we've already got severe cuts coming up because of the financial situation that we're in. I believe it won't be, I hope it won't be, because I'm an optimist, as bad as this when we actually get to it in each year, because I believe collaborative work, levelling up money, we can get some funding in. But let's not pretend that we're in a very precarious situation for the MTFF.
Thank you, Councillor Lismore. Councillor Bourne, I did see you indicate, but I'm just going to take up some of the comments there. I don't think an analogy of getting a Porsche is the same. Young people have suffered greatly as a result of cuts to services, significant cuts to Essex County Council youth services, considerable suffrage during COVID. It's not a Porsche that they want at least a bike, they want something. They have nothing.
Sorry, can I just add that they have the townhouse?
How often is the townhouse open?
It's open every afternoon, as far as I'm aware, and every Saturday. I have said, I believe the townhouse is underutilised. The funding that has come from the town deal will hopefully be the start of a new life for the townhouse. But it is a perfect position in the centre of town, on the bus routes. It has got to be used more.
The money for the townhouse is a capital investment. Today at the County Council, both you and I were there. I asked in the Everyone's Essex vision, where were the youth services mentioned? They were not. So I do not see any increased revenue funding for the townhouse coming. So there would not be any further opening times or any further youth workers there. Instead, when you said about your Porsche analogy, you said with a little bit of help, you'll get the Porsche. Well, there's a little bit of help being offered by Onside, which is £800,000 per year of revenue support to go alongside a contribution from local authorities of 400,000. They have success of delivering that model at 16 sites across the country. We also have a contribution from the town deal that could have made it happen. Therefore, I do not think it's the same in terms of the analogy that you make.
So again, I will come back to the point that I made right at the start, which is a political point. If you believed the funding was there, if you believed you had a site, why did you not do it yourself? It's very easy when you're not in control to come up with an idea. But as I say, moving forward on this, we will continue to have the budget workshops. If any councillor can come up with a solution to how this is funding, I will do everything in my power to look at that. And if it can, and the recommendations from the financial officers say that I can, we will put it back. But we have got to have cuts elsewhere to pay for this.
Thank you. And one thing you said earlier was you had evidence from partners that they would not support it. When I last spoke to NHS partners and the police chief inspector, for example, they were still supportive of an idea of a youth zone.
I'm talking financial support. I think almost everybody you could speak to, if you told them what a youth zone was, they would say, yes, of course I support it. Well, can we have some money then? No. No, that's not what we said. I'm talking about financial support.
Okay, I'll have to trust you, but if you could share any evidence on that, that would be helpful. Okay, I'll let Councillor Bourne, I'll hand over to you to go next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just think we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here on the youth zone, the whole youth zone idea. It's a shame that when we had our last scrutiny meeting where we made those recommendations that I don't think Councillor Lismore, you were here then. listen to that, because I think we probably have actually had more discussion about youth services tonight than we had at that scrutiny panel meeting when we were talking about the youth zone. I do find it quite incredible that we have a portfolio holder making points about a previous administration not putting it in a budget line, and then saying that more could have been done and we should be working with Essex County Council as a partner, because this is not what the Borough Council should be supplying in youth services, when Colchester has been trying to work with Essex County Council and through many different officers have been asking for stopping the cuts to youth services, which have been incremental over many years. Young people don't want a Porsche, as Councillor Corey said. They want the youth services that they need and deserve. And they don't want to wait for them either. They want them now. They want jam today, not jam tomorrow. And it's not a luxury to have a proper youth service provision. That's what it's become in this county. It's a luxury to have a youth service. We've got young people who are facing the most enormous time of hardship that young people have ever had to face before, in housing, in jobs, in skills, in what we're asking them to do and not to do, being judged all the time. That's what young people are facing today. And we're faced with having a youth zone or not having a youth zone. Well, frankly, I'd rather have I don't care where those services are. I want young people to have the services they need and they deserve, and I want them to have them now. So if we can have some kind of guarantee that someone is going to pull their finger out and work with Essex County Council, and Essex County Council are going to pull their finger out too, and have young people all over this borough, I mean all over this borough, town, urban, suburban, rural, having, being able to access services. We talk about old people and isolation. Well, young people are isolated too. They don't drive cars. They're reliant on people driving cars. They're not willing to get on buses. It's young people need services, which they are not getting. And we should stop thinking of this as a luxury. We should start thinking of it as an absolute necessity, but to stop forgetting about young people. I don't want young people to, if 4 years' time we're going to be at the youth zone, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. We bent over backwards to help isolated elderly people in this borough, and that was the right thing to do during COVID. We did nothing for young people, and we're still doing nothing for young people. It's not good enough.
Can I have a piece? Sorry, it's been a long day. An order here. I was chair of the youth strategy group for, I believe it's about 6 years. I just stepped down in May and Councillor Lewis Barber has taken over from me. Apart from the magnificent support of the Vice Chair of Councillor Dave Harris, we had incredible sporadic visits by other councillors. The number of meetings we had to cancel because nobody turned up. These are other councillors from all parties, but I'll be honest, the majority were not Conservatives, let me put it that way. We cancelled so many meetings, and if you want to check with Councillor Harris, please do. I tried to reach out to particular councillors and say, why aren't you coming? Well, we don't really understand it. We don't really sort of see the point. So I'm sorry, Councillor Bourne, you're wrong. There are youth services here in Colchester. They are doing exceedingly well. And so what happened with, for those that don't know, with the youth strategy group, what was happening was that funding was going to youth clubs, and nobody really knew what was going on at those youth clubs. We didn't know if they were safe. We didn't know who attended. We didn't know if volunteers were being trained properly. And I say we, sorry, Essex County Council did not know. They really didn't know how their money was being spent. So instead of that money going to youth clubs directly, the money was funded, put to youth strategy groups in each borough. So they're over the whole of Essex. And that youth strategy group decided then how that money would be funded. In my 5-6 years, however long it was as chairman of that group, we doubled, tripled, quadrupled the money that Essex County Council gave by bringing in partners such as First Sight, such as Colchester United Football Club, Chelsea Football Club, Tottenham Hotspurs Football Club. We quadrupled the funding available for young people. But I'm afraid the number of councillors that actually turned up for those meetings was very, very few and far between. And it was very, very disappointing. We tried different times of day, we tried different days, we tried them in different locations. No. So please don't say to me that youths are not, we do not have a youth service. We do, and we have a good funding, we have a damn good deal with other partners here in Colchester. We've got a very, very good reputation. So please, if you can take, each of you all, take that back to your group and say, please attend the youth strategy groups.
I will go back to Councillor Bourne as you interrupted partly there, but I would say I've been to both groups since I've been a county councillor, as has Councillor King, and we know the budget is £25,000. That is a drop in the ocean. I'll go back to Councillor Bourne.
I know the people that work in the youth service, they do an amazing job with the resources that they're given, and that's the problem. It's the resources they're given by Essex County Council, of which you sit on, Councillor Lismore, of which you've sat in this meeting tonight and told us that it's not a borough problem, so we shouldn't be throwing money at it. It's an Essex County Council, we should be working with them. We've been trying to work with Essex County Council, and the budget has been cut year upon year for youth services. So what I am saying is, I'm not that bothered about a youth zone. I'm bothered about youth services. And I think every single councillor in this room is bothered about youth services, because we have that in our inbox. We have young people out there that want to be doing things. They want a place to go to. They want youth services, whether it's outreach or a building. A building doesn't give them youth services. The townhouse is barely used. You yourself have said it's underutilised. We don't run that. No one in this room runs youth services in Essex apart from you. So, and you know, that you've, by your own admission, you've already said it's underutilised. So you need to do something about it. Now I'd like to come back to 11.2, please, Chair. Income budgets have been increased to reflect faster than anticipated economic recovery and management action, particularly in sport and leisure and car parking. How great it is to see that we have a resources portfolio holder who's joyous over the point that £600,000 extra is being reprofiled into the parking income budget line. Is that correct?
I will ask Paul to answer that.
Paul,
thank you, Chair. As I said in my introduction, this is a preliminary stage of the budget setting, and we do expect some of our major income sources, sport and leisure, car parking, to recover. That's something we're watching quite carefully in monitoring during 21-22. So in setting the budget for 2020-21-2, we did have a gradual recovery in income. And that continues in this report, but obviously it's something we need to watch quite carefully during the current financial year, and we'll probably have a much better idea when we come back with the budget report in January.
Does that help answer your question, or do you want to go further?
Not really. I just remember sitting on this committee for 2 years. I've come to scrutiny for many years now, where Councillor Lismore, your colleagues have been on this side. And like you say, it's very easy when you're not in control to come up with ideas. And one of the ideas when you were faced in opposition was that car parking is too expensive. And now we're using increased income from car parking to prop up our budget setting assumptions. I just thought that was fairly interesting to point out.
I believe car parking is a balance. It is a balance of the environment in trying to ensure, in a way, as fewer cars as possible come in. And if we are individually capable of coming into town and on an alternative method, then because of concerns about congestion, the environment, pollution, we have to think about that. That's obviously a big question moving forward, because if we want to promote our car parks, but we want less cars in the town centre because of the damage to the environment, how are we going to balance that? We want to make sure that the car parks, and I know you did this when you were in administration, you looked at the car park income and tried to put the best offers in to fill the car parks when they are at their most empty. Again, that's a balance. We've also got, obviously, the NCP car parks in town that we don't have any influence over. So it's always a very tricky issue moving forward on car parking. And it is a very, very fine balance, and things will change. We know our town centre is changing. We know car use will be changing in the future. And so we have to keep a very close eye on that. And we will be extremely cautious on how that affects the MTFF moving forward.
Okay, I'll move on, and Councillor Pauline Hazel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually feeling extremely angry at the moment, and you might hear it in my voice. And I will try very hard to speak appropriately, but I resent my colleague being harangued by members of the former administration, in that for 14 years, I have begged your administration to invest in Shrub End Sports Centre, the tennis centre, the only municipal courts in this borough. What was your response? Plan to build on it, to get rid of the tennis centre and to build on Boadicea away playing fields. And I want to say to you, how dare you do that and come here and lecture this new administration, which is trying its darndest to balance not only its books, but to provide services for our young, our middle ages and our older people. So that's my anger. And I really, well, I'll be quiet on that now. But Councillor Lissimore, do you feel that in regard to the townhouse, with proper investment and promotion, that could provide what could be said a stepping stone towards future investment and looking into providing as a youth zone? I agree with you, it's in the town centre, it's accessible to all, and I think it would be a very worthwhile project to take forward to provide some extra services for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hazel. When I went on the virtual tour of the youth zone, so I forgot now if it was Slough, was it Slough or Croydon? Sorry, I can't remember exactly where it was now. As I said at the beginning of this, I just kept thinking, because they'd open one door and they said, oh, we've got this. And they'd open another door and say, well, we've got this. And I thought, but we've got this. We've got, oh, it's a basketball court. We've got a basketball court. We've got this. And as I say, I will admit, I believe, in my experience, that the townhouse is underutilised. But with the funding that we now have through the town deal, that should be the catalyst to get it up and running and working how young people in the 21st century need it. It is there, and this money, I think, will open the doors wide to allow it to be used in a very efficient, effective manner for our young people.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hazel. I will just go over where we've been. So we had Councillor King ask some fair questions about the youth zone and the £400,000. I followed that up. Councillor Lissamore then came back about the previous administration and started that line of questioning to me. I asked valid questions as to why that 400,000 would be taken out of the MTTF. And part of scrutiny is to ask those questions, and that's all we have done. But actually, there's been quite a lot of questions back at us. And I do not want to go over old ground. That's not what we're here for. We're here for going over the opportunities that face us. And one thing I would say, unfortunately, so you had a virtual tour of the Croydon Youth Zone, and we do not have a fully equipped gym like the Youth Zone would have at the townhouse. We do not have outdoor courts like the townhouse does not have, but the Youth Zone would. We do not have a sort of skate park or opportunities around that. We do not have a sensory room and many other good things that it offers. But as I've said before, and I'll say again tonight, which actually I feel was misrepresented, Councillor Hazel, I'm not going to go further on that, because we are not going to go round in circles, and I do not want to continue this conversation further and further. A constructive point was put forward by Councillor Willits as well about sort of working groups going forward. I did stipulate at the beginning that the recommendation we'd put forward did talk about working with members and budget workshops, and I think that actually took some of the spirit of what Councillor Willits said originally at the meeting in August and has reiterated now. I believe if we take a recommendation forward from this panel to Cabinet, if we are to follow that suggestion by Councillor Willits of members working on this, it either one assimilates with the budget workshop or two is a new entity. But thirdly, in order for that to happen, we need to keep that £400,000 allocated in the medium-term financial forecast. Otherwise, we haven't got many options to play with. That would be my suggestion to the panel to make comment to Cabinet.
Can I just come in at this point, because to counteract that, as councillors of any political party, we have a duty to have a balanced budget. We have to by law. And the chief financial officer, as you have heard, has recommended that it be removed. Therefore, if this committee makes a different recommendation, you are going against the recommendation of the chief financial officer of this council.
Thank you, Sue. I will let you interject at points. I will just reiterate two things. One, this is the medium-term financial forecast allocation for 23-24, not next year's budget. And secondly, it will go against the recommendation of our committee that was put to Cabinet and agreed by Cabinet that we would work on this together as members at budget workshops. So that is where, and it does say, mindful of the legal requirement to deliver a balanced revenue budget, which I'm very mindful of. So we have that recommendation from Councillor Willits, and I've then added to that, that if we are to take that forward and put that to Cabinet, that we ask that the £400,000 remains in the MTFF whilst we do that process with members at the budget workshop or at a separate committee as put forward by Councillor Willits. So I would put that forward as a recommendation that we keep the £400,000 in the MTFF for members to work through at the budget workshops or at a working group as suggested by Councillor Willits to find ways of achieving that budget pressure. Can I have a seconder for that at all, please? Thank you, Councillor Bourne. Are there any other alternative proposals coming forward? Councillor Willett.
Chairman, I just do not believe that it's a difficult problem. It's a difficult financial problem and difficult logistics problem, knowing what we want of the youth zone. I do not believe that work can be done by a general member working group looking at other budget issues, because there will be lots of other issues which will just sidetrack people from this particular issue. We've heard the problem stated over and over again, and what we haven't had is options. We've heard the portfolio holder give her position. As a scrutiny panel, if we believe that there are other unexplored options, then we can go away and look at those options, whether I suppose we have to tell Cabinet what we intend to do, but we can go away and look at the funding options for a youth zone, how it would be done as a recommendation. Clearly, it's still Cabinet and the portfolio holder's decision whether they go away and do it. But I believe that unless we have focus on this issue, if we have a resolution which says we do it at a general budget briefing where there are lots of other issues to continue, we won't have that focus which is clearly needed if we are to determine whether there is another plausible option that we should ask the portfolio holder to look at. So I believe that we need to consider this as a separate issue and not just wind it in to another general briefing at which there will not be the time, the inclination or the support to look at what needs to be done in terms of a task to produce or to determine whether there is another option that could be pursued. So I just don't think it will work if we say, yeah, let's put it in the budget work group. It's just pushing it into the long grass rather than addressing the issue.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. Well, I suggested either or really in that recommendation. But if people are to support Councillor Willits' view that you have a more specific, that we be specific about it, the task and finish group is pretty much what you were suggesting, I think, there. The most appropriate sort of language that we would know for it, a task and finish group. Suggesting a task and finish group be outlined on this, and as I say, keep the £400,000 whilst we do that in the medium-term financial forecast. I see Dan Gascoigne has come to the table. Dan, would you like to contribute?
Thanks, Chairman. I was just going to say, I think, we do have a budget process, and this Cabinet paper is, one part in that process. Clearly, as Councillor Willits has indicated, there are bigger issues that I think the Scrutiny Panel ought to be thinking about, honestly, in terms of the medium-term financial forecast, and a specific task and finish group focused on the youth zone provision, in my view, would be, additional resource that we would struggle to find at this point in the financial year. We have a process, as I've said. Paul Cook has already indicated and explained the fact that this will be coming to the January Cabinet meeting and Scrutiny Panel, as it always does, for the final budget proposals. I would encourage you to make use of the member workshops that we've already got in place, as agreed and as referenced in the previous Scrutiny Panel report. That is the process we've agreed, where all members have an opportunity to contribute to the budget process that's been set out. And I think it is a good opportunity to look at the whole of the budget. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think the one problem with that is we're not going to have the opportunity if, as this proposal suggests, the £400,000 in the MTFF is taken out. That's a political decision tomorrow at Cabinet. If that happens, we won't have the chance to input into the budget workshop in that genuine way, knowing that that money is allocated there as it was allocated by the previous administration. So how do we square that circle?
Well, Paul has explained already that it's very important for him as Chief Finance Officer, as Section 151 officer, to be able to recommend a robust budget position going forward. And that is not just for the next financial year, that is for the medium-term financial forecast. That's why we have a 4-year MTFF period. So in my opinion, clearly, there's a recommendation which is supported by the Section 151 officer going to Cabinet tomorrow concerning the 400,000 allocation, and the reasons are set out in the report, largely because of the lack of support from the County Council as provider of youth services. So actually, the mechanism would be, I would suggest, that through the normal budget process, if there's a decision to put that funding back in, having done the work with, with all members having the opportunity to be involved in that, then clearly that decision could still be made in the January budget report. But at this point in the year, given everything that we know, the suggestion is that actually it's not prudent to have that in there.
Thank you. Well, I go back to my original recommendation that was seconded by Councillor Bourne, that left the option open for something along the lines of what Councillor Willets has put forward, which I would support. But I also said through budget workshops, which is more the way in which you have just suggested. We also do have the leader at the back of the room, which I appreciate him being here. And I know that Councillor Dundas, in conversations previously at Scrutiny, has given commitment to exploring the process around delivering a youth zone, budgets and collecting those. So I wondered if he has a view in terms of task and finish groups, which are...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm quite disappointed in the Scrutiny Panel this evening. I think you've done a really poor job on this item. This is a very important item. You've spent the best part of an hour and a half on one paragraph out of about 20. There are a huge number of detailed things in here which you haven't asked one question about, and you've concentrated on one item. So I'll be frank, you need to be scrutinising this a little bit better, but I'll gloss over that. The problem is, I've expressed my opinion on the youth zone. Yes, I think it's a very nice thing. Going back to Councillor King's comments earlier, the 400,000 is 2020 prices. Now, who here would bet their house anything on what cost 400,000 in 2020, costing 400,000 in 2024? Hands up. Not one of you. The other problem is the 400,000 of revenue costs assumes nearly 800,000 of match funding from elsewhere. That assumes support from the Tier 1 authority.
Councillor Dundas, I asked you to the table really to give a view on where we are at the moment with this recommendation.
Okay, my theory, I'll go to that subject then, because it's getting quite late and I'm sure we wish to get home. I have a great deal of concern about presenting or passing at Cabinet an MTFF which our Chief Financial Officer does not feel can be recommended. And we should all be concerned about that. I know, and you know, that both of us as former leader and current leader were told by officers that taking on the costs of the youth zone, which isn't just 3 years, because you're not going to build it, you're not going to spend 8 million and then fund it for 3 years, it's 10, 20 years, was frankly financially irresponsible. I can't see how we can get it in the budget and still have an MTFF which passes scrutiny. I wish we could. I wish we could do lots of things. It's not because I want to do it. Believe me, it's just the opposite. But I have to, as leader of the council, present a financially responsible MTFF. If somebody can tell me, and I was disappointed, I was disappointed at the budget workshop. It was a genuine workshop, but I heard nothing from anybody as to how to move forward with this or what compromises we can make together, cross-party, and it would have been compromises. We've either got to spend less on something else or we've got to up our revenue somehow. They're the only two options to be able to do this. And to be fair, I didn't hear it from Conservative members either, so I'm not just blaming other parties, but I heard nothing. It was just silence. So at the next workshop, if you're serious about this, let's hear something. Let's really hear some proper ideas. And you've got to name a site together. We've got to name a site. We've got to work out how we're going to do the capital funding. The total cost is 8 million. We hope to get 4 million from elsewhere, but that excludes the site cost. And there is a site cost.
Okay. Councillor
and how to afford the revenue.
My point was about whether we do look at a task and finish group, because it's within your jurisdiction to where we could look into these factors that you are now discussing.
I'm willing to discuss it. I think we would have to think about, and it's probably not a good time to do it at this time of night, exactly what that task and finish group is going to do, because you are inevitably going to get, if you make it just about the money, okay, you're inevitably going to get into a budget setting process and a task and finishing group, which, as we know, isn't going to work because you've effectively got 2 budget setting processes going on. I think if you wanted a task and finish group which looked at the fundamental questions around a youth zone, which would be identifying the site, identifying the capital, and then moving on to identifying the revenue cost and how to pay for it on an ongoing basis, then I think that would be more practical. But I think, I just think we need to be careful not to try and set a wider council budget in a task and finish group. That would probably be my comment. So in terms of reference, we'd have to work out carefully.
Thank you. Okay. Therefore, I suggest taking that forward from, as Councillor Willits wanted to specify it more, and I do agree, and from what you've said, Leader, to recommend that we do comment to Cabinet, make the recommendation that a task and finish group on this area be set up, looked into, outlined, the terms of reference be achieved. And my recommendation, the second part of it, was that the 400,000 remain there within the MTFF whilst that process takes place.
Which is against the recommendations of the Chief Finance Officer of this council. Please do not underestimate what that means. We, as I say, of councillors of all political parties, have a duty to provide a balanced budget, regardless of our political wishes and wants. But you have heard tonight our Chief Financial Officer saying that it is prudent and it is right and it is correct to remove it from the MTFF. Now, I've given you my assurance that if in the future we can come up with a site, the revenue, the capital, we will look at reinstating it. Okay, you have that reassurance from me. But at present, with the way the MTFF sits and the way the finances sit, our Chief Finance Officer is recommending that we remove it. And if we go against that, that is a very, very serious proposal.
Paul Cook, can I just ask you, if we do not remove it this evening, what is the impact of that?
Well, thank you, Chair. At this stage, we do have quite a significant gap in 23, 24 and later years. I would concur with the Leader. You couldn't really look at the financing of this in isolation as a budget measure, because as set out in the report, there's so many other factors that need to be taken account in reaching a balanced budget. So I think it would be helpful, whether it was a task or finish group or some other apparatus, to look at those principles of the youth zone, the cost, site, and those issues, but not, I would say, to make any change in the MTFF at this stage, because that will be finally determined when we come to Budget Council in January. But any findings of the group that looks into the youth zone, subject to approval of the Cabinet, could then be built in. But I don't think it would be constructive to move the MTFF further away from being in balance at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor King indicated I will be generous and come to you, but we will try and wrap up shortly. Sorry, Paul Cook, can I just say no change? So you mean the change of taking out the 400,000 allocation is how it is? So you want no change from that?
At the moment, the 400 allocation is taken out, and I think that's the position we should stay with at this stage. But of course, it's welcome that there would be a group to look at all the options in relation to the youth zone. And if that were to come forward with proposals that were accepted by the Cabinet, the cost of the youth zone could be returned into the MTFF or the budget. But at this stage, I wouldn't put an increased cost in the MTFF for 23-4 and future years, because it's moving away from achieving a balanced budget.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. Councillor King, briefly.
Thank
please.
you, Chair. Very briefly, I just want to say I absolutely concur with the approach that we should have a parallel path. It wasn't clear to me when I read the paper that this was the recommendation of the SFO, the Section 151 officer, that this was due to the robustness statement. It was reasonably, I think, understood as a political decision, not just a financial decision. But given Paul's clarity about this, which is very welcome, it would be good practice, in my view, that we accept that advice, as is the usual constant, and both sides usually do, and that we explore through some form of group what the facts are and what we can do. The reason we've had this passionate conversation, and it is over long, and I'm sorry for so many of us being up so late, was because this came out of the blue. This was not debated or discussed. It needs the conversation, and I agree it should be in parallel, good practice, whilst we continue with the related budget improvement work that Dan Gascoigne and officers have underway. So I just want to sort of give my own perspective. As somebody who run a very sort of sound ship, I thought we should continue to do so. We shouldn't stop, and we shouldn't prejudice, and perhaps we have today, what we might be able to do with partners on the youth zone. It's absolutely was and still is a big ask. Let's try and get this back on track as an exploration cross-party without making life any more difficult for Nanciers. So I support the thrust of the last 10 minutes of conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I will quickly, Councillor Bourne, thank you, and then I'll go back to what I was going to say.
I just think this is a good example of how all of us have disbenefited from not meeting together in the town hall for such a long period of time. I do think these conversations could have been had outside of the camera lens, which we would have, pre-COVID, that would have afforded us that opportunity to have. And I'm just making a plea to shadow cabinet partners and cabinet that can you find a way where you do have some meetings where you just talk in a room together with your masks on, so that we can avoid this, because actually this could have been avoided and we didn't have to play this out over camera, which is quite unedifying for all of us, to be honest. And we could have spared ourselves the last hour and a half. Everyone is passionate about this or not passionate about this, it doesn't matter. But it's not particularly edifying. The other thing I did have another couple of questions on this, but I feel...
We'll come back to that shortly. We'll wrap this part of it up. I mean, the resolution that we passed to Cabinet from this panel that was agreed by Cabinet with B does say they would work with members and budget workshops. I don't believe this process has enabled that to happen. However, I'm going to listen to what has been said. Councillor Lissamore, from you, and you've directed us to the financial officer. And on that basis, then I will take that part away, but I will progress with the point from Councillor Willits, we have discussed about a task and finish group. I see you've indicated very briefly, Councillor Willits, and then we'll wrap this section up with a recommendation and go to Councillor Bourne.
Very briefly, as you dictate, Chairman. This council takes years to do anything. And what I would suggest is that we recommend that there's a task and finish or some suitable organ to consider it, and that perhaps we put 3 afternoon sessions in the diary next week, and we meet together. As Councillor Bourne says, we just don't meet together, we don't talk. So again, let's put something in the diary for next week. We have 2 or 3 sessions on it, we thrash it out, and we come back with, if we can agree, on a sensible proposal for what it is we think a youth zone is and how we're going to fund it, what it will take priority over in terms of the other expenditure of the council. And we put this as another option back to the portfolio holder. But given where we are in the budget process, we need to do it. We can't do it now, but we can do it next week, but not next month or next year. It needs to be done quickly and it needs to be done effectively.
Chair, I agree. Sorry, butting in there with Councillor Willits, and therefore to do it quickly, don't set up a task and finish group. Just the people, the decision makers are in this room here, and if it's not agreed, that's being in opposition, isn't it? We have to take the rough with the smooth, and that would be the rough. So no task and finish group, because I've been on enough of those. They are purely tedious and turgid, and just put people in a room.
I would disagree and believe that you have to have some mechanism in which to have that conversation. But it's a recommendation you partly supported, Councillor Bourne, so I'd have to make that recommendation again without you. I believe that we need to have a further conversation on this, and so I would recommend that a task and finish group to Cabinet on this matter of funding for the youth zone go ahead. So that's what I would recommend. Do I have a seconder for that? No. So a conversation on this be had. Okay, right.
How about a subgroup of the scrutiny panel, Chairman?
That's a task.
You can do that of your own volition.
Thanks for the help. Not. So a subgroup of the task and finish group where a conversation can be had.
Sorry, do you remember the days when we used to have tea?
Yes.
They were conversations. We sat at tables and we chatted. So can a budget allocation of £2.50 be made for a couple of McDonald's coffees as well included?
Sue, you're in charge of that. Look, I think a conversation does need to be had on it, and we recommend, I put this recommendation to Cabinet that we have a further conversation on the youth zone and funding of it, and that can happen at a subgroup or at a task and finish group as okay, I'll get enough support for the task and finish group. That conversation can be had at a subgroup of scrutiny. Okay, so we agree with that? Thank you.
So,
right.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, was that a resolution that you wanted to form a subgroup? Or a recommendation?
It's a recommendation. It's a recommendation to Cabinet that we form a subgroup of scrutiny to have the conversation on the youth zone funding.
In relation to a balanced budget?
Always, that's already in the recommendations that you did agree to. Thank you. So, further questions on this budget item? Councillor Bourne.
Thank you very much. I know you've been waiting for this. Appendix A, page 203, just some clarity over the line, Healthy Homes Disabled Facilities Grant covering more of the cost of delivery of services. There's £20,000 taken out of that. Is that, can someone explain that to me, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. there is some difficulty in use of the grant that we get from government, that a large content of the programme is actually administering the grants. So there's more flexibility now in the latest set of regulations that the grant can be used partly towards the cost of assessing and administering the grants. So that in effect is a net saving to the council, because we can fund more of our activity with government grant in an agreed way. So it doesn't detract from the Disabled Facilities Grant Programme, but it helps us to operate it more efficiently. So that's the sort of basic nature of the saving.
Okay, so we're not taking £20,000 out of the DFG. Is that, obviously that helps us deliver things like level access showers in Colchester Borough Homes properties and all sorts of things. It's just an admin thing.
Yes.
Those, all of your other questions, Councillor Ball? Councillor Dundas, you indicate.
Just while Councillor Ball is speaking, she asked a question earlier regarding the parking income. Just to explain, the increase in the parking income in the table is the increase in the assumed parking income, because at the beginning of the year, we were very cautious in where we thought how rapidly people would come back using our car parks. It actually seems to have been quite positive that actually car parking users come back slightly faster than we anticipated. So that's why that number's gone up. It's through an expectation, fingers crossed, that more people will use our car parks this year and next year than we'd anticipated, rather than the fees actually going up. So I just thought I'd explain that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, members? Not at this point, but we understand the next budget workshop is in November, so we can have further discussions on it then, and we will have another paper on the budget that will come to us later on. Okay, so we have reviewed and commented and made one recommendation. So can we agree that and move forward? Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lissamore and Councillor Dundas and Paul Gascoigne. Dan Gascoigne and Paul Cook. Excellent. Good budgetary skills, not sure about the football. Okay. Item 13, the work programme 2021-22. Owen, we go over to you just to let us know about the programming, especially with portfolio holders coming forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to confirm that we've got every portfolio holder booked in to give a briefing and have a question and answer session with the panel, barring Councillor Crowe, but Kelly and I are following up on that to get him booked in for a session in this municipal year. So you'll have a full attendance, fingers crossed, by all cabinet members. Apart from that, I don't have anything to add to the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Owen. I think it's really important we get Councillor Crowe in. We've had, we will see Councillor Lissamore again, but we've had her time this evening, and the leader has accepted our invitation to attend most scrutiny panels, so thank you. So having all portfolio holders at one point would be what we have recommended as spokespersons, so thank you. Are there any other questions on the work programme? So we can note that and note the progress from Owen's report. Okay, thank you. Therefore, that ends the business for tonight. So I'd say the meeting is closed. Thank you all. Good night. It warmed up in the end a bit, or at least with a bit of air, hot air from all of us. Okay, thank you all and good night.